This week, true details around Salt Typhoon are still unknown. The search for a portable pen test device, and how Paul likes to spend money on ridiculous things. Directories named Hacker2 are suspicious. Can a $24 cable compete with a $180 cable? Hacking Tesla wall chargers. Old Zyxel exploits are new again. Hacking Asus drivers. Stealing Kias, but not like the Kia Boys way. Fake articles. Just give everything to LLMs like Nmap. Retiring floppy disks. An intern leaked secrets. Discord link hacking. Cray versus a Raspberry Pi. More car hacking with a BMW. All that and more on this episode of Paul Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control on every executable that can happen in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind. Visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today. Coming to you from the Hacker Syndicate Studios, this is Paul Security Weekly. It's episode number 879, being recorded on Wednesday, June 18th, 2025. I'm your host, Paul Astorian, wondering if we pushed the live stream thing, which we forgot about. So hopefully we can push I didn't put it in Discord, and there's probably people asking about that. I apologize. Hopefully we can
push it real good.
I think we are live already. Oh yeah, there's 3 in the audience. We're live. Hey, we're here with Mr. Sam Bound. Sam, welcome.
Hello, glad to be here.
Mr. Lee Neely is here with us. Lee, welcome.
Hey, look at what day and time it is. It's great to see everybody.
Yes, Mr. Bill Swearingen is here with us.
Live and in living color, Paul. I'm here.
It's good to see you, man.
Thanks.
I like your jersey.
Thank
it's
you.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Make sure you do check us out on the live stream every week, Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern time. You can join our Discord to tune in, securityweekly.com/Discord. If you can't get into our Discord for some reason, just give us a shout. Send us an email, hit me up on social media, whatever, and we will help you get into our Discord channel. I still haven't gone through like all of the invites. I haven't cleaned up the invites in our Discord yet, but that is coming up on my to-do. It's on my to-do list, which means it'll sit there for a really long time until.
Yeah, I think you should prioritize that, Paul. I really, really like being able to interact with the, with live. Like the Discord live is just it's one of my favorite things to do.
Awesome. Are you guys monitoring the Discord? Because you know what, I still don't have a Discord.
I'm getting in there right now. I will.
Thanks, sir.
Monitor it.
Sweet. There's no other announcements. Wow, we're free to dive right into the security news. Do we want to start with like the fake news? I mean, based on our pre-show kind of banter about what's real, what's not real. There's been a lot of cases of this. I was subjected to a scam actually. Which was interesting. As long as I've been in cybersecurity, as much as I pay attention, it happens to the best of us. I was like, well, shit, that person's not real. And I just sent them like $100. I'm like, wow.
What happened?
That was totally fake. So my son, so speaking of fake things, my son needed a part for his BMW, it's an older BMW. And so, we don't want to sink a lot of money into it because it's got like 180,000 miles on it. So when we find parts, I'm like, what's the cheapest part? So my wife's like, well, I found this Facebook group and this person has the part. And the person's like, well, you can pay me via Bitcoin, Zelle, Cash App, or Apple Pay. Did I say Bitcoin?
Yeah,
you did.
Yeah, like all the shady payment methods. My guess is PayPal and Venmo have caught on to this person or have policies that they don't want to deal with that deal with scams better. I haven't looked into it, but that's just my guess. So the person starts texting me And then their scam is basically once you send them the money, initiate the transfer at any of them, they're going to say, "Oh, that didn't go through, or I lost access to that account. Can you use the other one?" So they're just trying to get you to pay the $100 or so to as many different things as possible, and
What?
then they go away. So I don't think this person ever had the part. I think the person after, like, once I caught on, which was too late, but I did catch on, and I'm like, wait, light bulb went off because I was like rushed making the payment because
Yeah.
it was last Wednesday. So I had this like pressure thing, and I let my guard down. Even momentarily letting your guard down, bad things can happen.
So
Yep.
they were going to try and get you for
Yeah,
200
more.
bucks.
Yeah. I was
What?
like,
No.
dude, I'm not sending you any more money. And
Yeah.
then my shit detector really went off.
Right.
And then I started researching. I'm like, dude, all your shit is fake, basically. I'm like, also now I reread every single one of your text messages, and I'm pretty sure you're in Pakistan. Like
Yeah.
I could just dealing with Pakistani scammers in the past. It felt that way just by the way they talked. And then like all the, pieces come into play. I'm like, oh, like you're on a forum on a Facebook group, and Facebook doesn't care about scams, which is why you're lurking there, because you can report all day long. Because I thought about the bicycle thing, and I'm like, there's a massive like bicycle theft ring being operated out of Facebook, and Facebook doesn't care. I'm like, huh, go figure. Because I listened to the Darknet Diaries episode, so like all the pieces started to
So
fit, and I was like,
had an
wow, I should have
interesting
known
one. I had
before.
an interesting one on Facebook too. So
Mhm.
I will tell you, I caught it before I sent any money. Maybe I'm a
Mm.
little bit smarter than you, Paul. I'm not
I
sure.
know,
But
dude,
so
believe me,
but
my
I had
hacker
this
card needs to be
right. I
revoked.
had one that was really very clever. So on Facebook, I'm a member of some of these small business groups, like small
Mhm.
business get together groups. And there was a woman that posted to one of the small business groups, "Hey, we're having this event, and we've got 4 tables left at the event. If you want a table, it's $150 or whatever,
Yeah.
just for to."
I think that 100 to 150 mark is good because it's not gonna set off any bells and alarms. No one's gonna be prosecuted for
That's
that,
right.
you know what I
That's
mean?
right.
It's like it's a good
And so
yeah.
I connected with her, and I'm chatting with her, and everything's sounding right. And like, I'm like, okay, so how do I pay? And I don't remember exactly what the payment terms were, but something felt a little like there was something a
Yep.
little off about it. So then I was like, okay, so tell me what the dates and locations of it. And she gave me like perfect paste. Here it is.
Mhm.
So I went and Googled that, and I couldn't find that event anywhere on Google.
Yeah.
Had they taken that next step and just
And
made
just created
a fake whatever,
a
that I
Facebook, even a Facebook event,
that's
right?
exactly right.
Yep.
I would have totally like bought in, and you're exactly right. That $150,
Yeah.
I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time other than
Exactly right.
report, right? And
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah,
So I went to a junkyard, which was a whole experience.
yeah,
Junkyards are awesome,
they
by the
are,
way.
yeah,
But it's like total hacking thing because they're like, you can't bring a car jacking because I had to get the side skirt off, and the jack stand they had it on was pushing on the side skirt.
uh,
So my son's like, "Well, we just need a jack to jack it up." I'm like, "Dude, he's like Mr. Handyman. He's awesome." But
your
they wouldn't let us
son,
bring my son, and I'm
Cool.
like, he's like, they won't let me bring the jack stand in. I'm like, all right, let's go. I'll go in with you. And I go in, and him and his friend and me, so it's 3 of us. I'm like, see that axle over there laying on the ground? Let's drag that over here and try and just lift the car up a little bit, like
awesome,
totally. And then I found what is the part called that holds the hood up once you open it in older cars, right? There was like a metal rod.
yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found one of those, and that's what I used to break the clips off of the thing. I'm like, this is hacking, guys. This is great.
like
So I did get it off, but
literally.
like, I like ripped a chunk off of it. I still think it's okay, but it was like $20 for
Hmm.
the part. So I'm like, okay, that's junkyard's probably safer than buying crap off of Facebook. It's just an FYI. All that shit, most of the stuff on Facebook like that is
And it's a
scammy.
fun weekend excursion.
Oh yeah, dude, junkyards are great.
Yeah.
Well, regarding that social engineering stuff, I think it's really important to realize that nobody is safe. Intelligence doesn't protect you. Technical sophistication doesn't protect you.
Correct.
Kashmir Hill has an article a couple of days ago in the New York Times that is amazing, where people started talking to chatbots about their personal problems, and pretty soon they were believing that they were talking to their dead relatives and
Yep.
spiritual entities until they were driven insane. And it actually told them, well, I tried to kill you and it failed, so you better tell the news media and email this all to Kashmir Hill by name.
Now, what
And these people
What?
were trained in psychology and social
yeah,
work and
yeah,
accounting. So you would think they would know better, but the point is we're all emotional beings. We all have
And
this need for
that's what it was,
connection.
Sam.
Yeah.
I was in a rush. I
Yeah.
didn't wanna upset my wife. Now, the attacker
Yeah.
didn't know this, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't wanna upset my wife
And your
and
kid, and
ignore,
you wanted
like,
to do for your kid. That's a
and I wanted to
perfect.
help my son, right?
That's
Because
right.
Right.
my son has been going around and around trying to get this part, trying to get his car fixed, and I didn't want my wife waiting around going, "Why haven't you paid this person?" Right? I didn't wanna make her upset by slacking off on another task that's
Mhm.
non-work related, right?
Mhm.
So I'm like,
Mhm.
"I gotta get this payment done." So I put the pressure on myself because of those other emotional reasons.
How did you pay? Like, what was the?
I used Zelle.
And so
So
Zelle doesn't have any way to recoup
nope,
those funds.
It's a
nope.
bank transfer. So
a
it's like a
bank
It's like
wire.
transfer.
sending a check, I think. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
there's
it's a wire.
actually a whole lot of fraud with Zelle, and
Yep.
it's actually starting to get some regulatory attention because Zelle is owned by the 10 large banks.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
but they basically say, you know, no ticky, no surety. If they get fraud, too bad. Check it before you send it. But one thing I was going to tell you, I just when one in a strategic planning session for the credit union of the alternate paying apps, PayPal's number one for people that use paying app once a month.
Yeah.
49% PayPal, Venmo 48%, which is owned by PayPal. Cash App 40%. They've had a 30% growth in the last year.
Wow.
They are the most popular with the younger set. Then Zelle
Interesting.
at 39%, Apple Pay Cash 30, what,
I don't quite
19%,
understand
Google Pay
these
10,
percentages.
Facebook
We're
Pay.
like at 340% right now.
Yeah. Western Union 4%. No people were using that
It's still a
anymore.
thing. It is still a thing. It's
Yeah.
interesting, we talk about credit card fraud, but credit cards is a much better way to pay because you have that you
Well,
haven't actually paid, right? The
Yeah.
credit card company can,
what's
and it
int-
varies. Getting your money back from a credit card company isn't 100% either.
The
I mean,
the
what's
opinion
interesting
of
about something like Zelle, though, is it's directly connected to a U.S. bank
Yeah.
that has a person that opened it with a driver's license. Like,
Mhm.
isn't that connected
Oh,
to?
no. I'm pretty sure so in other scams that weren't happening to me, but happening to, one was, for a friend as an example,
Mhm.
for his business. When I followed the money, it went back to, like, a bank account in Texas, and I think what scammers do to get around what you're talking about, Bill, is they compromise someone else's bank account,
Mm,
and then they use that bank account to transfer money in and out. So it's
Yeah.
like a legit bank account, they've just compromised the
Right.
credentials or whatever.
I
Yeah.
got you.
Right. And they just hook it up through and Zelle's hooked to your phone or email. So
Mhm.
by the way, the 20 somethings who do use Zelle, they use it to pay their landlord. They don't use it with their peers.
Yeah,
They use it to
interesting.
pay old people.
But I think the percentages, Bill, in these statistics are more than 100% because someone can use more than one payment app.
Yeah. Oh, I know these add
Yeah,
up to
I
more
think
than.
I think that's why it worked
Yeah,
out
I
like that.
mean,
What
And
So,
does
but then
what
you've
does that
got
percentage mean, Lee? Like when you said
of the respondents who used it, 49% said they used.
oh,
Let's
okay.
see, percentages among Americans who use P2P or alternate PDC services at least once a month.
Okay,
So this could add up
we're
to
not,
more than
we're
100.
not we're not adding up to 100 because I could say I use PayPal, I use
Right.
Zelle, I use
Correct.
Yeah,
Venmo.
so of 100 people, 49 of them click the PayPal box. 48 of them also click or may have clicked the Venmo box, but they may be duplicates there.
Gotcha.
But still, the interesting thing is that the top two are PayPal products.
Oh,
They
yeah,
use one or
that
the
is
other of them.
interesting.
And Cash App is growing like crazy. And that's actually incredibly popular.
Well,
Another stat
so
is
I personally no longer use PayPal. I use Venmo and Zelle occasionally, but I
Mhm.
got to tell you, I have no idea which one's the most secure for like if I'm trying to not to you guys, like to you guys I don't care, but if I'm going to be paying for something on Facebook Marketplace
Yeah,
or
right.
whatever, right? What is the most
yeah, that's
secure
an
or
excellent question to assess them. I mean, it's like
none of them?
a lot of,
PayPal,
by the way,
Yeah,
right?
you know,
PayPal's got a pretty good anti-fraud because they've been around
yeah.
for so
Oh,
long,
yeah,
right?
they're huge.
PayPal is, a long
Right.
time ago.
Yeah.
And Cash App, these are also providing alternate banking services. I mean, and they're even offering debit cards. And the 5 top alternate banking services are Affirm, SoFi, Chime, Venmo, and Cash App.
Hmm.
And Cash App on the debit card has 24 million debit cards issued.
Wow.
Venmo only has about
You
7.8
can get a
million.
debit card from Cash App?
Yes. Yes. They're
That's kinda
replacing your
scary.
bank. They
Hmm.
are your account. They will handle
Yeah.
your money. I
I
mean,
mean, online only banks are fine. There's some good ones out there, but
yeah. And
you
that's
gotta
Well,
be
you
you
know,
gotta shop around.
it's supposed to be Twitter. Elon Musk said Twitter was going to be doing all our banking as of like 2 years ago.
no, he said X, didn't he?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
splitting
that was
hairs.
right. Yeah, that was
But yeah, and there are a lot of folks going after that market because there are folks that they want it to just they don't care about the physical location as long as they can get at their money, send it where they want to, and they probably don't do a whole lot of assessment on the security, but more than we think. Um,
yeah, so, I mean, for those listening, educate both yourselves, obviously, based on our experiences, and your friends and family, right? Because they're more likely to be the ones that are like, "Oh, like, I keep sending this person $125, but I never get my stuff." It's like, don't don't do that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
and,
after the fourth one, that's when you know.
right, that's when
Right.
that's when they'll
Yep.
know, right?
Yep.
But I think also educating that Facebook has zero protection from fraud, and a lot of scams are operated involve Facebook in some capacity.
Mm.
So
Right. Well, there's I bet you also some of that blowback from the censorship of a few years ago that got hopefully turned off. That was really bad.
oh yeah, there was a big thing about that's when they I think that's why they switched to AI.
Yeah.
That was the culmination of the Darknet Diaries episode, right? Where Facebook was like, well, we use AI to weed out
That's right.
scams and fraud.
That's
And I'm
right.
like, but when people have evidence, you're ignoring it. That's frustrating.
Yep.
Also frustrating that Linux Journal read an article that was completely fake. Completely fake. The article read, Arch Linux officially adds Rust, and they talked about replacing System D with a new Rust-based init system. And I was like, well, the last thing we need is another init system. But that article turned out to be completely fake. And I don't know when I started reading Linux Journal. It was when it was a print magazine, probably sometime in the I don't know. I might be getting that confused with Byte. Byte magazine was also great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
But I remember Linux Journal has been around for a really long time as well. So it had built, they rode on that trust that the community had built with Linux Journal. Those of us that are older remember reading the magazine. We're like, well, of course we trust Linux Journal. They've been an established publication since I started using Linux, right? But I think, was it Sam, your take on it was the editors kind of dropped the ball and
Yeah.
didn't validate it?
I mean, nobody's perfect. The editors of the journal try to make sure everything is fact checked and reputable, but nobody's perfect, and stuff gets through. Every famous thing, the New York Times and everything, occasionally publishes something wrong, and then they have to retract it and apologize, which worries me. This just vanished from the website, which
It
is
did.
unprofessional. A
I agree.
page should be there explaining what happened, but maybe they're going to put one up. But
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
should say, that's why, the Twitter system, like community notes, is better. You don't take down something fake, you add a note to it. So now
Right.
people that go there
Have a
say, oh, here's
reference.
what it was, and here's the correction. That would be better.
I
So-
agree. I was not happy seeing the 404 on Linux Journal's website. I think we deserve some type of explanation, even if it's just, hey, we know this was fake and we're working on it. Like, I'm a huge
could e-
fan of that, right?
It could even say, we're not sure yet, we're reviewing it, but some people said it's fake. That would still be more helpful.
Agreed.
I wish I could. This image I have from that presentation on my phone has 3 AI generated images. One is of the Pope wearing a designer jacket that obviously he wouldn't. The third one rather is this woman who doesn't exist. It's just a composite. But the interesting was on the middle one, which is a family, which is supposed to be a dad and a daughter doing all this stuff. They actually included the prompt that was used to create that image. And I'm thinking, not just mark it as fake, but how about if you could get the prompt that created that fake thing and say, this is what happens when you tell, whatever, Gen AI to do this, just to
Yeah.
educate people a bit.
I'm kind of scared as AI evolves, when scammers start integrating that technology more and more. I think we're still kind of on the cusp. I think people are doing it today, but I think we're still kind of on the cusp. So go back to Bill and I scam, right? That we observed through Facebook, and there was indicators that something was wrong. In my case, it was a language thing. Bill, in your case, it was the event wasn't real. If you were to use AI to help generate that stuff,
Right.
my concern is if I know this person is from, let's just say, Texas, like, and they don't talk with the accent, I don't believe that they're from Texas. If they're using AI to make them believe like they're from Texas, right? If maybe it's a video call or whatever, that could enhance scams. I hope we have some checks and balances, because some of these indicators, I guess my point are gonna go away, right?
Mhm.
Like, I could tell by the language that most likely Pakistani scammer, right? But that
Mhm.
might go away as they get smart with AI technology.
For
Right
sure.
now, we can say, well, that's probably AI.
Well, that
But
happened
when
with
we can't
phishing,
tell the
right?
difference, right?
That
We can't tell the difference.
that
Yeah,
happened
weird,
with
huh?
that happened with phishing, right? So it used to be, I mean,
Mhm.
the guidance not too long ago was look for misspellings, look
Mhm.
Yeah,
for,
yeah.
like, and now that nobody's sending phishing emails that are properly, or that are, junk. They're well written, nice
Right.
looking, those kind of things.
But it's not just spelling and grammar, it's the way that people talk.
Yeah.
Now, we're trained
Well,
just from dealing with so many scams to kinda know how
so
scammers
what's interesting
talk.
is misspellings may be the indicator that it
M
wasn't AI generated at some
Completely
point,
agree.
right? Like
Completely
that may
agree.
be how
Mhm.
something that we do look for is, hey, look for improper punctuation, right? Look for the use of contractions, or
Right.
possessive contractions that aren't correct. Oh, okay, that was actually written by a human or whatever.
I mean, even if they're, like, a little savvy, they can make AI write and communicate not like the standard AI. If you just tell ChatGPT or Perplexity today, "Go write something,"
Yeah,
most of us could spot
for
that.
sure.
But if you contextualize it with someone else's writing, like I have, it doesn't write like that when I prompt it
Hmm.
in one of my spaces. So, that's also, we got some feedback from a listener who was like, "Don't summarize with AI and read it on the show because sometimes it's inaccurate." Fair point. Fair point. You all can summarize stuff with AI. You don't need us to read it to you. I do it more for the talking points, but I will adjust certainly moving forward, and especially after this week, do a whole lot more fact checking. And people, I think I let my guard down a little bit in terms of fact checking, articles too. Thankfully,
Well,
Bill, you noticed the I think it was you that noticed the fake one.
yeah, I would like to hear Linux journals. So Sam, you're absolutely right. I wish they wouldn't have taken it down, and I would like to hear the story
The
behind it,
story.
right?
Yeah.
Like how did this come to be, right? And think about all the things that had to quite honestly had to fail in order for that to get published on a publication like Linux journal. Now, I've run sites of some size. I don't want to say that my site was necessarily big, and when there wasn't a whole lot that would
In
have
our
had to,
world, it was big. In our
right,
world, in my world especially, it was big,
right.
Bill.
It wouldn't have
I was a
taken
huge
much for
fan.
me just to hit the publish button. Like I didn't have
Mhm.
to like have it reviewed or any. I didn't have an editor
Mhm.
or anything like that. But and maybe Linux journals the same way. But and
I bet it is these days because everybody's struggling to make money. And I heard years ago that Forbes is that way. Once you're a
oh
contributor,
yeah,
you can just publish stuff. It goes right through.
yeah,
Yeah,
And,
because they're trying to cut
most of these
costs.
sites are struggling for money. They don't
yeah.
seem to have editors. I noticed an incredible amount of misspellings and bad grammar and stuff today, too. So it's clear that there isn't much review going on
Well,
anymore.
Forbes is a known. So if you were to Google my name plus Forbes, I think I've got 4 or 5 articles that I've written for. I didn't have any part in that. None. They needed.
Yeah, a lot of it's ghostwritten
Yeah.
content too. Yep, that happens. Which is totally fine. I kind of think we should people should disclose if it's ghostwritten, but
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, I with the Linux journal incident, much like security incidents, we just want to know. I'm a huge fan of tell us what
Yeah. Just
happened
tell us what
Mhm.
happened.
and tell us what you're going to do in the future to prevent it. Look, no one's perfect. It's
We're
fine.
all using AI.
We're all human. We're all
Yeah.
human. We're all using AI. We're all
Mhm.
victims of some stupid thing here or there, and we tell you what happened, and we tell you what we're going to do to prevent it. No one is immune. No one is immune from
Yeah.
attacks, scams, fraud on the internet.
For
No
sure.
one is immune from a security incident. So,
No, and I think you're really right. This is a really important part of incident response. You have to admit you did a bad thing,
Mhm.
explain how it happened, explain how you're going to prevent it. I think Cloudflare is a real leader in this. They've had several
Yeah.
security incidents, and the
Right.
next day they have a complete explanation. And that's who you can trust, is not people who
Correct.
are perfect, who claim to be perfect, but people who explain what they did in a clear way.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can't protect what you can't see. Everyone knows that, right? That's why Run Zero gives you total visibility across your internal and external attack surfaces. Worried about unknown and unmanageable devices? They got those covered too. Run Zero also helps you illuminate all types of exposures, even the elusive ones. They go beyond CVEs to tackle the hard stuff, even 0 days. No agents, no authentication, just crazy deep data about your assets and exposures that focus on the risks that actually matter, not an endless sea of CVEs. Try it free. Visit securityweekly.com/run zero to get started. Well, and speaking of that, ties in my story number 8 on information sharing, which I think is, and this is again, I'm going to harp on this again because it's really frustrating. And whoever wrote this article did, maybe it was AI, who knows? But whoever, I'm not saying it well. I don't want to call them out if that's not completely accurate. But his name is Joe, and Joe published this article on Salt Typhoon and breaks down the information we have about Salt Typhoon, how it ties back to Ghost Emperor and Famous Sparrow, who those groups are, how those groups were named and came to be, who did the attribution, and is just trying to pull. I give props to Joe, man, pulling on threads to go like, what do we really know? And
Mhm.
then very well done summary. I love this quote. It said, Joe says, defensive decision making will be limited so long as detailed information on just what Salt Typhoon is, and more importantly, how they operate, remains scarce. Second, for those grasping for anything to bolster network defense and similar actions, following weak links to historical activity may appear to satisfy a need, but likely will result in misguided actions that fail to address the root problem.
Hmm.
That sounds like an actual author that knows how to write, not AI, by the way, if I had
Yeah,
to
it does.
guess. And very well written. But essentially what Joe is saying there is, we as defenders, we don't have enough information to take an action. Secondly, if we rely on older historical information about these identified groups, that's just a shot in the dark.
Right.
Essentially, I'm not as eloquent as Joe.
It's how they used to
That's
act, not how they're acting today, right?
correct.
What could possibly go wrong?
What could go wrong? Well, people get pwned. That's what happens.
Yeah.
And I
You
what is
know.
wrong with information? Bill, why? I think you have a unique perspective on this because you've been in situations like this.
Yeah.
Is it because there's still an ongoing investigation, or the
Yeah.
investigation was so high
So
profile that we don't get that information?
yeah,
Correct?
and so just to be very, very clear, I am no longer part of part of this
Yeah.
group, and I'm not investing Salt Typhoon at all. So these are just my opinions, but I've done these types of investigations for many, many
Sure.
years. And my guess is that we do have the information, and that it is being shared at a like a TLP red, or
Yep.
a very, very look. You can use this for information.
Within a group. Yep.
You cannot share it out
Is
externally
being shared within telcos that are protecting our critical
for
infrastructure
and for
for
there's
now.
a lot of
Mhm.
reasons, right? So
I agree. Yeah.
this is something that I've talked about publicly a lot. Like, there's pros and cons of this strategy, like, but there certainly is this concept of, well, we want to watch and see what they're doing before we start publicizing any type of IOCs and those kind of things, because they'll just
Because
move off of
we're gonna tip our
we're
hand.
going to
Yeah.
tip our
Yeah.
hand,
I
right?
get that. Yep.
And so that's all well and good, but how long do we hold on to that information before we start striking back, and we start
I
knocking
it,
down
it
that infrastructure, right?
I think the Salt Typhoon has gone on long enough. Like,
That
okay,
that
now we need to disclose. And I lived this in university world too. We had an information sharing group,
Mhm.
very close knit, highly vetted,
That's right.
and you bring stuff to the table. Others brought stuff to the table, and it was highly targeted information about who was targeting university networks and how, so that we could protect ourselves. And then we would eventually make that public.
Well, and
And we
so,
would
I'm
would
not
talk
sure.
about,
I'm
right.
not sure if that same sharing, like, a lot of times, I had a very high clearance, and a lot of the times
Hmm.
the indicators that we were dealing with were classified indicators. So I had to have a way to check had to have a way to check, non-classified networks with classified
Yeah.
indicators, right?
Yeah.
And so then when we start talking about, well, I want to share this, but it's illegal for me to do that, right?
Right.
And it's so annoying to me that an IP address is a piece of classified information.
I know.
Calm on, you know what I mean? Like that.
Right.
Like, I don't care how you got this information. That you can keep classified all day. That's fine, but the IP address should not be classified just because I got it from this group or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so annoying to me. It's so hard to move fast with that type of. It's hard, and fast isn't even the right word. It's hard to move at the speed of computing, right?
Yes.
When we're
When you're
having to.
withholding. Yeah.
Ugh,
But there's
Well,
reasons behind. You actually set my mind at ease, Bill. That there are
yeah.
reasons for this.
Well, and
However,
so I've
also,
reached out.
like, how long should it go on?
That's
So we were
right.
talking about Salt Typhoon for how long?
Well, and I think maybe you and I talked about this on a previous podcast, but when this first started, or when it became not first started, but when it started becoming in the
Public.
public,
Yeah.
lexicon or whatever, I reached out to my network, and Paul, I think you did as well. And
Yes.
we got a lot of feedback. Yes, we're on top of this. No, we are not talking about it.
We are
right?
not
Like,
talking
Right.
about it.
that's
That's
right. Yeah.
like
so
the insider baseball network of cybersecurity.
Yeah.
People were tight-lipped about it, and there's probably good reason
well,
for that.
and there
But I
were
think
contributing factors
eventually,
too.
what's that, Lee?
There were also contributing factors. For
Yes.
example, where I was in the government space, attributing an attack to a specific nation like China was a no-no. You couldn't say that publicly. That was classified, with big consequences.
Yeah.
Private industry caught on and started doing that attribution
Right.
without, and that's how it got out.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
more than, and so there were things like that where, we were seeing stuff at certain levels. The counter intel guys had all kinds of things to say that
For
I
sure.
can't say a damn thing about. But private industry really has been rocking, and there's now more information sharing than there was that 25
Well, and it's
odd years ago.
interesting
Completely
too.
agree.
I don't know if we covered this last week. I think I had a story in last week we didn't cover about universal naming conventions
Yeah.
for threat groups.
Yeah, I remember that.
And
was
I don't
that
I don't
week-
think we
last
talked
week
about
or
it
the
on the
week
show.
before, something like that.
But
Yeah,
I broke it down into three categories, I believe. Now I don't have my notes in front of me, but off the
Mhm.
top of my head, if we were to create something similar to the CVE list, but for indicators of compromise, and so you'd have, I think it was three major buckets that I had. It was
Yeah.
the threat actor group name,
Mhm.
it was the botnet name, and it was the malware name.
Mhm.
Because today, those could be three different names. So the famous Sparrow uses the ABC malware,
Redline malware.
and then the XYZ botnet is what's being built by that malware that's being controlled by that group. And I don't think we get to 100% accuracy on all that. I think if we built a system to track that universally, which would be very hard to convince everyone to participate, we'd have a pretty good mapping. And if some of those details were missing, I don't know that it affects defenses. Like,
The
do
problem
I care if
like,
it's China or North Korea that's using the malware, to create this botnet and targeting these systems, or is it China? Like, at the end of the day,
There's so
maybe
little
it's swap,
value.
but like, yeah,
There's so little value to
the
all
country
three
of
those.
origin, to me could be a field that could have multiple countries, because maybe that group is operating out of China, but they were hired by some other country or some other group, and it looks like China. Like, who knows who's hiring who to do what? I don't think that really, in most cases, doesn't matter, right? What matters is, it's tied to a nation state or a group out of this country, and they're using this malware that roughly has these signatures,
But as
and they're building this botnet.
But as a defender, why is any of that data valuable? It's great to brief your executive, or whatever. But like, as a defender, like, who cares what the name is? Who cares what the name of the malware is? Who cares what any of that stuff is? Like, I need actionable intel, right? And so when we start talking about indicators of compromise, to me, that is not naming.
It's a technical,
right
it doesn't matter. You're right. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter to me. I need to know that someone implemented Linux malware that has these characteristics. And you know what? I'm gonna go back to my engineering and research groups, and I'm gonna say, hey, look, there's malware. You're right, Bill. I don't care where it comes from, what the name is, even information about the botnet. But inside our product, I'm gonna be like, hey, can we just go look for this stuff? Because that's like the signature. And how do we do the best job we can to, as generic a way as possible, identify that? I don't want to identify just the signature, just the IP address,
Yeah.
or just the
No.
hash, because that's kind of lame. How do we detect this behavior on these systems and link it back to malicious activity? Where
So
it comes
here's where
from, you're right,
here's
it's
where the
kind of irrelevant.
standardization comes in, is that you're looking for, this kind of behavior on your systems to see if anybody's, mucking around, which is the IOCs. But then when I'm talking to Bill about what's going on, if I'm calling it Cozy Bear and he's
Right.
calling it Fancy Bear,
I know.
so they're trying to get, so we're
I
calling
agree.
it the same thing. It makes it easier to communicate about it. It
Agreed. That's CVE.
does
I
make the
mean,
job a little easier for the defender. They've still got to do the same stuff and detect it, but at least then if they're trying to reach out, they are
So
using the
to be
same
clear,
names for things.
Lee, I
Yeah,
completely agree with you. I want a
but
standard naming convention too, right? Because we
yeah.
that once we move, but I don't want those names to be called IOCs. But we
no,
do
they're
need to have.
not. No,
You're
hell,
right.
hell no.
You're
They're
A
right.
they're
frame of
labels.
reference.
But
Yeah.
we do
Reference,
need
yes,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
I'm good with that.
Me too.
And I don't know how successful. I mean, how many names is Cozy Bear
Right.
got?
All,
There isn't an
It's
issue to
all
try and
Mhm.
shrink them down.
So what was
And
interesting about the naming convention thing was it was going to be CrowdStrike and Microsoft putting that together, and I don't
yeah,
like, man, are those
Well,
like
I
there's
mean,
two other Trend joined them and somebody else joined them.
okay.
So there's
yeah,
got
but I
4
mean,
now.
Microsoft and CrowdStrike have a pretty good perspective. Just those two companies alone, in terms of
This feels like
number
a
of customers,
merch thing to me.
it does. But also, CrowdStrike and Microsoft observe a lot of malicious activity collectively,
For sure.
but they should be welcoming of SentinelOne and
I think it should
a
be
lot of.
MITRE. I think MITRE should be
Yeah.
the one.
I think there needs to
Yes.
be a central body that helps wrangle all of these vendors and standardize the naming convention.
Mhm.
So we
Oh,
can
come
speak the
on.
same language.
Merchandising.
I know.
APT's the lunchbox.
Oh man, I
APT's
can't
the
wait.
flamethrower.
It truly
It is.
like what's so funny is I look over and I have some of the CrowdStrike like action figures, like
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
They
Well,
know
Well,
how
then
to,
then they wouldn't be able to make the action
yeah.
figures.
in
Spaceballs, the cyber threat actor.
they're doing Spaceballs
figurine.
too.
We talked
And
about
in
that
the
on
trailer,
Hacker Syndicate, man. Yeah,
he's
we
wearing
did.
Spaceballs. The
You know what's
sweatshirt.
funny is going back to the top of the show. I thought that was fake because I see so many fake
Oh, I did it
trailers
first too.
and
Until I started
announcements
looking it
for
up.
announcements for movies. I'm like, they're like that just sounds fake. Spaceballs 2 sounds completely fake. There is no way they're making a sequel to that movie. And then everyone's like, no, Paul, it's actually like a real thing. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I kind of crowdsourced no, it is real.
Yes.
And Mel Brooks has the Twitter post with the video, which
Yep.
I thought was fake. I even watched that video and I
Yeah,
thought
we-
it was. I'm like, that's fake. Anyway,
We listen to what you want. We're making this movie instead.
It's AI
That's Mel
Mel
Brooks.
Brooks. I don't know. I still kind of think it's AI Mel Brooks.
They
when
gotta
when
hurry though.
Spaceballs
That boy
gets
is
to it.
98 years old.
Is that how old Mel Brooks is?
Yeah.
Holy
Yeah,
crap!
and he's doing great, but
He
damn.
looks great for his age.
Oh,
He was
apparently
on
they
point.
also are just wrapping on History of the World Part 2.
Mm.
And so, yeah, but I'm absolutely right. My first thought was, that's fake. Come on. No, it's
Yep.
not.
So, talking about real things, I'm talking about my shopping spree. So this is
Yeah.
what
Oh,
happens
yeah.
when
What'd you go-
when I
what'd you
check
go
my
do?
news feed. Sometimes I go on a shopping spree, and
I
it'll
gotta
make
tell
sense
you,
of the.
Paul, one of the things you bought, man, I'm jelly. I want one too.
Oh, okay, good. I think I did good then, right?
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of stuff out. Look, there's a lot of stuff out there for these mobile pen testing things.
Mhm.
I've seen a million of them. I see them on social media all the time. People creating their own cyber decks, which is awesome, by the way. But I'm lazy, so I went a different route. But it was interesting. It started when I saw this thing about the ultimate mobile pen testing toolkit, and it's called Striker. And they have a monetization model where you had to pay for the app, but it's free now for a certain period of time. They also have a USB dongle that I believe, technical details were light, but I believe this USB dongle runs Linux and allows you to launch attacks from it and can plug into any smartphone without having to root it. If you want the app, it is kind of similar to Kali Net Hunter, in my opinion. that requires a rooted Android phone. And so it's called Striker. And so I did use Perplexity to summarize this one because it wasn't a deeply technical article. I'm like, I read the article. I'm like, what's the high level? And they say Striker's a free, feature-rich, easy-to-use Android app for penetration testing, now including premium features at no cost. That was essentially the crux of the article. So I read up on the app, looked at their USB dongle, and I'm like, how would I do this myself? Like, I don't want to pay $55 or whatever for a dongle because I believe we can build this for much less. But then I started researching platforms for handheld hacking devices, and there was another article I read on that led me down this path on Hackaday that was talking about the Hackberry Pi and similar devices. And so I started doing some digging, and I found that Electro, who I bought my Electro Note or whatever they call it, that it's not a laptop, but it looks like a laptop and you can plug anything into it thing, which I love. So I'm like,
Mhm.
I like Electro stuff. That's pretty cool. They make actually a cyber deck that you can buy for like $400, but they make, and I apologize, I forget who the person is who designed the Hackberry Pi, but there's a person who designed it, and I believe they're using Electro just as the vehicle to be able to sell it.
Mm.
And so their Tindy account, it was all sold out. But when I went to Electro, it was like $140,
$68.
$168 for a Hackberry Pi CM5 9900. It looks like a BlackBerry device. So if you know what a BlackBerry device looks like, for you younger folks, you have to go Google image search that and see what a BlackBerry looks like. It's basically a handheld device with a screen and an onboard keyboard. So I could have built this myself. I was like, Paul, why didn't you build this yourself? Is the logical question. I'm lazy. I have a lot of projects. So if I can buy something for $168, that gets me most of the way there. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good. I'll spend that. But next you need a Raspberry. So depending on which model, in the model I chose, and for the application that I have, I wanted a Raspberry Pi CM5. That's the compute module Raspberry Pi 5. Very performant device. You can get it with 16 gigs of RAM. I think that was another $129. I had to order that from pieshop.us, which was the only other site that had reasonably priced CM5. You can find those all on the internet. That's just where I ordered it from. This one, so they recommend in the Hackberry Pi that you get a CM5 with an SD card slot, the light version they call it, because they're like, it's way easier to work with. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So I got those two things on order. And I have, the alpha networks, the dongles that
Yeah.
can plug into it. So I'm like, if I put Kali on this, I can have this little handheld device. I can crack Wi-Fi networks. Totally not because the soccer field where my kids play has Wi-Fi and very poor cellular coverage, and they don't share the password. So that's not why I ordered this at all. Because I don't want to. My friend who wants to do this, I don't want them showing up to the field with this big laptop with like all stuff sticking out of it, right?
Right,
Want to kind
yeah.
of be discreet,
So
discreet about it. And so I'm like, well, I'm gonna build this. This looks pretty cool.
it sounds like you're still under $500.
Well under $500. It was 168 plus 129, I believe.
Well, I was thinking plus how about the AFLA network adapter?
Yeah,
Those are just in stock.
That's like $40. I had that. I think
Yeah.
that was a Larry recommendation for the
Mhm.
Alpha Network card to go
Yeah.
on it, which I have on I have a Raspberry Pi 5 with an M.2 hat with an NVMe in it that's plugged into my CrowView Note that I've been testing the Wi-Fi hack. I haven't done a lot of the Wi-Fi hacking, like cracking WPA networks. WPS is also, there's a lot of tools available for that have been out since like 2011. There was more research in 2014. And so I hadn't played with that in a long time. I did Wi-Fi hacking back in the day. So I've been kind of testing those tools at home. Like, these are pretty cool. This has come a long way, and it runs great on Kali. I'm like, if I could have something mobile, that'd be nice.
Yeah, and just looking at the form factor, so this one's really neat. It looks like a just taking a look, it looks like it's probably like about that big, right?
Yeah.
And it'd be a pretty neat little device. And quite honestly, like the RPA 5 compute module will also run a lot of emulators for games and those kind of things,
Dude,
right?
it's
Like,
it's an awesome board. Yeah,
yeah.
it's fast.
So be a pretty cool device. But yeah, it's pretty cool. But it was the next one that you bought that really got me going. So
But I bought something else. Oh, the cables.
the cable, right?
Oh, the OMG cable alternative, is that
I don't
one?
know how I found this,
Yeah.
but I found a GitHub account which is linked in the show notes. Joel Moreno, I believe is the name. The link is in the show notes. He calls this the Evil Crow Cable Wind device, and he had set up a shop on, I believe it was Tindy. I think it was Tindy, where you can buy essentially an open source version of the OMG cable for $24 versus the
Unbelievable. Yeah.
$180. And I actually plugged this into Perplexity. I didn't put it in the show notes, but I'm like, hey, can you like go read about both of the OMG cable and this open source one and do a comparison, which is a great actually task for an LLM,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm not asking you to make any decisions. Like, just go analyze some data for me because I'm lazy. Tell me about the differences. And like, basically, like, it was like, there's some feature differences in terms of like support for fancy things in the OMG cable. But like, essentially, these things are doing the same thing. So I'm like interested how a $24 cable will perform versus the actual OMG cable. And for those who don't know, the OMG cable, I forget where this came from. A security researcher did it, and Kevin Mitnick was promoting it for a while, and that's how it got like really popular. And then at some juncture, Hack 5 made, I don't know if they made their own version
No.
or what
No,
the full backstory was, but I know
they
those.
partnered with OMG, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So and
But
I
it's basically a cable that is a rubber ducky.
That's
It's
right.
the rubber it runs ducky scripts, but it looks like any standard USB cable.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and quite honestly, like the pricing story behind the OMG cable is,
Mm.
that the CIA or the NSA, I can't remember,
So
NSA,
it
I
was
think.
CIA had what did they call it?
Yeah, they
It was
had
it was
one.
a code word for their project that did it, and it cost them what, $10,000 or
Right.
$20,000?
Yeah, I think it was $18,000 or something like that. And
Yeah.
and so OMG cable, you can buy one instead of $18,000, you can buy it for $180. And
What a
now,
bargain.
quite honestly, what a bargain. And now, but I always kind of felt they were a little expensive for what they did. Like to be perfectly blunt and honest, I've never had an OMG cable because if I'm going to be doing that type of an attack, right, it's going to be something that um that I'm being paid to do, and I can just do it with a rubber ducky or a Raspberry
Yeah.
Pi. To be quite honest, like
Yeah.
I can do it
Yeah.
for
I've done it on a Raspberry Pi Zero or whatever.
That's
I've
right.
built those before
Yeah.
just as an exercise to be
Now
like,
24
this should work.
bucks
Yep.
at
It works.
Yeah, but
$24, like that
It's an ESP32 in the cable.
that is
Crazy.
pricing that it's worth it, right?
Yeah. And so, but what's awesome about this, to put it in like bootloader mode, because there's no
love it.
buttons on a
I
cable.
love it.
Did you see this?
Yeah.
He puts a magnet on it. So
Yeah.
he's got some kind of sensor
Yeah.
that senses a magnetic field and tells the ESP32 chip to go into must be telling it to go into bootloader mode. I haven't read the full documentation.
It's true. That's what it does.
Yeah.
And so what's really interesting about this is I've and I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast or not, but I've been doing a lot of research on like how would you analyze, okay, here's the question. You find a USB drive in the parking lot of your company, and we need to analyze it. What's the answer that we say? Well, all four of us would say we throw it away, right? Don't plug it in, don't do any, we throw it away. What happens if the boss says, I want you to analyze it? Right. Like, like I want you to look at this. Well, so some of the instructions that, that I've been putting together is like, if you start to, like, if it is a rubber ducky or if it is a Raspberry Pi button, there will be a button, there will be a way to put it into bootloader mode that you can extract the contents of that program without having to run it on a computer, right?
You can go the other way. I don't often do that. Normally in bootloader mode, I'm putting firmware on it.
That's right.
But in bootloader mode, it shows up as a serial TTY.
That's right.
You could use flash ROM or ESP tool rather to
pull it off,
pluck the firmware off it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what I found really interesting about this is like, now I gotta like have a magnet, and you know what I mean?
The magnet.
It's neat.
It's a picture of a little magnet on top of the cable when it's plugged into a
It's
computer,
really
and
clever.
that's
I like
bootloader
it.
mode. It is.
And at $24 a piece, you probably, who cares? You go buy one to see how it works,
That's
whether you
right.
use it on a job or not.
That's
I
exactly
mean, you're
right.
not going to spend
I bought
180
two. I
bucks.
bought the USB-C to USB-C and USB-C to USB-A
So
Nice,
versions.
buy both of
I'm
them.
doing the exact same thing right now.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
And why wouldn't you? Because $24, not
yeah,
$180.
even just to have something to mess with to see if it works, it's worth $24.
Well, I'm thinking,
Yeah, go ahead, Lee. I'm sorry.
I was just thinking, Sam could create a lab and have his students buy their own cable at $24 a piece. Well, probably not,
Yeah.
but it
No.
would probably, well, it's cheaper than the textbook, right?
Well, yeah.
Well, and so
But still.
one thing I was kind of looking at the GitHub repo. This is something that I'm terrible at, but he's been very, very active. He released a new firmware for 2.0 4 days ago, right? If you scroll down and look at the firmware, it looks great. It looks well. I mean, it looks
It's ESP. Yeah, it's
it looks
ESP32
embedded,
code.
right? It looks
Yeah,
embedded.
yeah.
But it looks fantastic. Like the live payload, it has Ducky script type capability. It looks fantastic. I hope that this guy's wildly successful. And I hope that this project continues.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I'm hoping a lot of researchers are able to use these to get the stuff done they wouldn't ordinarily get funded.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. You had a good shopping trip there, bud.
I did. I feel like I was just gonna say, like, did I stay within budget? I didn't spend an exorbitant amount of money, but I got some cool
Did
cool
you
little
have a
hacking
budget?
devices. No, I don't have a but I have
Yeah,
budget. What's that?
I know.
I'm like,
Mhm.
that looks cool.
Yeah.
I need to buy it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Just like my Tesla and my Tesla wall charger. I'm like, I need that. I need to own a Tesla because I rented one. I told the story, right? Rented one. I'm like, that's a really cool car. Like my wife's like, you've always wanted one. She's like, rent one, and we were like, both kind of like, this is a really cool car.
Mhm.
Like, I don't care what you feel about Tesla or Elon. I don't. Just as a rule of thumb in my life, I don't tie my purchases to like beliefs. Because if I were to start doing that, I don't know that I'd buy anything. Like I don't know. Like I could find some reason not to purchase something because of something I didn't agree with. So I'm like, I'm gonna buy stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
within reason, but mostly I'm gonna buy stuff. So I'm like, okay, I bought a Tesla, and then I was like, I bought the Tesla wall charger. I was a little tipsy when I bought the Tesla. Did I say that when I leased it? A couple of drinks, and I was like, yeah, I want all the things that go with it. I want all the charging cable. I'm like,
Ooh.
I want to charge it at home. I'm like, yeah, I don't have an electrician right now, but I'll figure it out when I get home and I get back from vacation. Lo and behold, I figured out that one of my friends does electrical work on the side. And he's like, dude, he used to install the Tesla charging full stations, the superchargers.
Mhm.
And I'm like, so like, I just need a small one in my house. He's like, yeah, dude. And he gave me a great price. I'm like, all right, cool. Install it. And then I set it up and it had Wi-Fi, like it plugged in, has a default. I think it's in the manual what the default Wi-Fi SSID and password is for it. And I don't remember, it was a while ago. I had to go through some setup process like you would for a new IoT device on your network. And I was like, there's going to be vulnerabilities in this because this looks like it's a, some kind of SOC, chip inside of it that implements Wi-Fi. It was very similar. It felt very similar like an ESP32 kind of style SOC, right? And it just has a very basic functionality. And I've read other stories about charging stations and even, I believe, Tesla wall chargers.
Yeah.
But none like my story number 12.
Right.
So this group, Synactive, is the group that wrote a very detailed post, like also how chargers work, which, I mean, it makes sense. They go in the technical details, but it's all the things you would expect a charger to do. Like, hey, I'm plugging in this car with a lot of batteries and a lot of juice in it. And so you have to negotiate with the wall charger how much, current and all that stuff goes between the charger and so it does that. And the article explains how that happened, which I thought was very fascinating. But then the article that catches my attention, and if you're going to write an article, in your first couple of sentences, catch the reader's attention. And they did a great job at this in this article. because in the first sentences they're like, "Hey, we figured out. We're going to show you how we did it." But the crux of this article is in the first couple sentences, the Tesla vehicles have the capability to update the wall charger. So that means there's some kind of data exchange that goes from the vehicle to the wall charger. And the attack is if I go plug something into a wall charger, if I can implant code and run code on the wall charger, now I can potentially access your network because it's on your Wi-Fi network. And I'm like, and with all these, and they say it in the
Ooh.
conclusion, there's a lot of chargers in public places. In fact, the same model wall charger, when I rented my Tesla in Florida, I pulled into a parking garage somewhere where we had lunch. And it was this exact model Tesla wall charger
Wow.
that was available for public use and for people who lived in the. So I don't know if it was people. I think there was some apartments there, but a lot of retail shops and restaurants, and they had one of these wall chargers. So this is accessible to an attacker. And long story short, they built a device that looks it's basically a vehicle, but it's not a vehicle. It's
Yeah.
just the electronics components that you can plug into a wall charger and ultimately send a payload to the wall charger and run code. Whenever we talk to security teams, one thing is clear. They are under more pressure than ever, facing increasingly complex and higher stakes threats. That's where Flashpoint comes in. Flashpoint empowers organizations to make mission-critical decisions to keep their people and assets safe. Flashpoint combines cutting-edge technology with expert intelligence teams, empowering security leaders with the critical data and alerts and analysis needed to act before threats escalate. And with Ignite, Flashpoint's award-winning threat intelligence platform, you get access to real-time insights, finished intelligence, and analytics all in one place. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Flashpoint.
So what's interesting about this is, when and knowing very little about the amount of charging infrastructure, like the EV chargers that you install, like there are a whole bunch of them, like they're Tesla and Wolfbox
Yep.
and all these other ones, right? So
There's a bunch. Here in Rhode Island, we have ChargePoint.
no. I mean
which
the
I don't
ones
know
that you
if that's
put in
a.
homes, like your
Oh, in your home,
homes,
there
right?
are a bunch for your home, correct?
You would
Yeah.
kind of expect that Tesla would probably be one of the better ones, right? I mean, not
Well-
not knowing anything about it, you would expect they're probably one of the better ones. But from what it sounds like, the vulnerability is that Tesla is allowing that firmware to be updated to go from the car to the charger, and
Correct.
the other ones probably don't have that same route, right?
Route. Well,
Right.
maybe I don't
But
know.
they're using a firmware downgrade flaw, which
To do
Tesla
it. That's a great point.
which
Lynn.
Tesla's patched, so you
Mhm.
can no longer downgrade the firmware the way they were doing it.
Yeah,
But
like if you
it's
were to,
still-
if you were to like,
until there's a vulnerability in the firmware downgrade protection. But
I mean, I would rather I don't know which would be more secure, getting the Tesla charger update from a Tesla, even though it's a bogus one, or from your network where I don't know. Where have you got more supply chain risk?
right.
I mean, you could. I mean, he was thinking about what if you had some sort of authentication between the car and the charger for updating, right?
yeah, you're right, Lee. Like, so like you're right. Like, so I also have an EV, just to be clear, but I run off the 120 volt. I don't have a 240 charger. I don't need it. And so real early on, I thought for sure I would need a fast charger at home. Not at all. I can get by with just plugging it right into the wall. It works fine.
Like a regular
Like a
wall socket, or
regular
like
wall socket.
Yeah.
yeah.
You're
Because
just
they
not in a
I
hurry.
bought the one that so that's kind of slow for a Tesla. I don't know what it's like for other
All
vehicles,
slow,
but
super slow.
All slow.
All
12-hour
slow, but-
charge
Yeah.
kind
you
of
can
thing.
get a 220 volt like for your dryer.
Yeah.
Right.
But the,
You have
Bit
one of those
the
faster.
thing
installed.
is, like, and so like, yeah. We can talk about it
You
takes
could do
forever to
that,
charge
or you
my
can do
car.
the wall charge. So like
Yeah, but
it goes from
I
slower to
drive-
faster.
I drive maybe 30 miles a day, right? maybe.
I
And
agree.
most of the time,
I live in Rhode Island
Right.
on a full charge. If I were to put my Tesla, I have a Model Y,
right.
to 100%, I could drive around my small state of Rhode Island quite a bit
That's ex-
with 300 miles of range
So that's the
before I
strategy
need to
that
go
I
find
have.
a charge.
There may
Yeah.
be times I use my car all weekend and I get it home and I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm in trouble. Like, I've got like 18% left. and then it takes me all week to charge it. It's fine. Like it
because
works.
you're not going
I'm not
anywhere.
going anywhere.
But also, 18% on a car is very different from 18% on your phone.
That's
Like the
right.
batteries are much bigger. Like
Yeah.
it's a much different scenario.
That's
And I
right.
think that some of the hesitation, especially like, not to knock them, like older people, like, my parents or my aunt, like that generation, they're like, oh, I could never deal with, having to charge a car. But, I'm like, it's not like your phone. Like, I think you're thinking of it like your phone. When your phone gets to 10%, you're in panic mode.
Yeah.
If your car's at 10%,
Yeah.
you still got a ton. And also the car is, most EVs are smart. I know Tesla, for example, is the one I'm more familiar with. It will change the dynamics of the car as
Yeah.
the battery gets down,
Same.
so you
Yeah.
have longer range, right? I mean, I'm sure most EVs have a
Mhm.
similar system. So
Right.
like you're not in a dire
And they
dire
do
need.
often, and they have the ones I've been experienced have charger location capabilities.
Correct.
Find me the closest
Tesla's
charger.
Oh, yeah.
Tesla's actually pretty bad, but the apps on your phone are way better.
Yeah, there's an
Yeah.
app
Well,
called
I-
for
like
finding
Plug
a charger.
Share that is
Plug
just
Share,
is
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, that's the one I would. If I'm running low on battery and find a charger, and the Tesla is like, oh, you got to drive 30 miles to get to the supercharger or any kind of. I'm like, no. You go in the app. I'm like, there's one right here. It might be slow, but it's going to give me enough
So,
charge so then I can drive.
I do
home.
want to bring it
Yeah,
back to
that's it.
something Lee said a minute ago, and like, well, do I trust the updates that are coming from the who knows where over the internet or over Tesla? And you've got a really good point, and something I want to bring up. A few years ago, we found backdoors that were put into prosumer camera systems. We've talked about it many times on on this podcast. And one of the things that was being shared in some of the groups that I was in is that the reason why they put backdoors in those prosumer cameras is because you're self-selecting a certain type of audience. You're selecting, okay, if I'm going to have a home that has a bunch of cameras, right? Like what kind of, it's more than likely a somewhat affluent home, right? It may be somebody that we want some dirt on or whatever. Well, the same thing could kind of be true for these chargers, right? Like that might be a self-selecting audience as well, right?
Hmm.
I mean, like if you were to take a brush stroke and you were to say, um, give me some attributes of somebody that would have an EV charger in their garage.
Yeah, I mean the buy-in is, I don't remember the exact cost, but it's a few $100, $500 for the Tesla wall charger. I don't remember what it cost, but it was
Yeah.
a few $100s for the charger itself. Then you've got to have an electrician install it.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
I
you have
don't
to have an EV,
recommend.
and you have to have
Yeah,
an EV.
and you have to have an EV. So you have to buy the
Yeah.
car.
Yeah.
You have to
That's
buy the
more than a few
charger.
$100.
Right.
But then, like, I think when I looked at it was rough cost like $1,300 labor to have one installed.
Yeah, so
right?
the
And my
real
friend did
reason
it. My friend did it for a few $100
yeah.
less than that, but that's still like, dude, that adds up. Like that's a
Yeah, it
now
does.
the benefit once you get to that point is, oh my god, I can charge at home. Like it's great, right? Like
I mean, like, so when I looked, it was going to be about $5K to install it in mine. I was like, if that's not worth it.
oh yeah, no, that
and-
wouldn't be worth
But
it.
I
for
gotta
me,
tell
no.
you, man, like the thing about the EV that really changed my mind is if you really start like really watching per week, how many miles do you drive per week, right? And if it's like 300 miles or less, like every morning you wake up, your car is full, ready to go.
Yeah,
Like
yep.
every single morning. Like if I get out and like even with a slow charger, even with one that takes 24 hours, that like if I get out and drive 30 miles right now, 50 miles right now, and I come home and I plug it in right now in the morning, it's full. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know.
Well, that's the beauty of home charging
Yeah.
is I'm asleep. It's charging while I sleep. Also, your electrical, the rates are lower overnight as well. And you can program, I'm sure most of the
Yeah.
vehicles have the same thing, right? You program it. You're like,
Yep.
if I come home and I plug it in at 5, 6 o'clock or whatever, don't start charging till about midnight and then ramp it up to a full charge at 6 a.m. And then in the winter, for example, I'm like, also bring the temperature up at 6:30 a.m.
Yep.
to this amount. So when I get in and take my son to school, the car's warm.
There you
Like,
go.
it's so awesome.
Very nice. I have no objections to the technology in the Tesla. I think it really pushed the envelope, and the other EVs have benefited as well. My objection to them is the infrastructure isn't sufficient but that doesn't mean they're not cool, and that doesn't mean they're they wouldn't be a kick to drive. I mean, hell, they
So
look like
that
a
was my
rocket
initial
sweat on wheels, man.
that was my initial pushback too, until a coworker of mine said, "Bill, for the next for the next month or whatever, just record how many miles you drive." And Lee,
Mhm.
I have used the public charging infrastructure, I think twice,
Yeah,
maybe
I've only
3
used it a
times.
handful.
And
I've only used it a handful of times too.
yeah,
And
it's
and I
we
will
have
tell
this
you,
tendency to take off and drive, a couple hundred miles
yeah.
each
So
way.
I will tell you, then you need you need a nice car. You need a nice
Yeah,
car.
and when we do road
It
trips, I mean, I'm
depends where you're.
talking
Yeah,
800 miles a day. So,
I agree, Lee, and it depends on where you're driving. If
but
you're in
that's
a
me.
if you're in a
For you guys, it
populated area,
rocks.
you can find chargers. It's fine. But when we take trips like for soccer, and we're going to New Hampshire or whatever, you get
Yeah.
into those rural areas,
Yeah,
dude. There's no,
no.
there's
You
not.
need
I'm like, I don't want to. I probably could. Like
Yeah, but
for all the EV fans out there, yes, I know I probably could. I just want to deal with the headache. So that's why I have a nice vehicle as well.
yeah.
And that's what we'll take. Only because like sometimes we're just going to the middle of nowhere. Like we're going
Mhm.
camping next weekend or we're in a couple of weeks. And like, dude, I'm taking my truck. Like I'm not taking the the Tesla because we're gonna be at a campground and there's not gonna be an EV charger at the campground. Like I'm just
And then we
sorry.
have our people like our buddy Joff Thayer, who uses his Tesla to tow his trailer to for camping, and he's got
That's
the
brave,
battery
man.
stuff worked out. So
Well, I mean,
good
if
on
you
him.
can,
I mean,
yeah,
damn.
if you want to do it, yes, you can, and put that effort in.
Yeah.
I'm lazy. I'm like,
Yeah,
no.
All right,
yeah.
boo Tesla. Let's move on.
Yep.
Hey,
Okay.
we should we do one
That's
of
fine.
Bill's stories?
Yeah, let's do. Oh,
How
Bill had
about
some good
Cray?
stories.
In
Bill had
that
some- oh, the
Cray,
Cray versus Raspberry Pi was great. I just was telling the story about the Cray.
Yeah.
I've told it on the show before. Worked at university. I heard the story before I got there. Someone broke into the Cray, hacked into the Cray, patched the vulnerabilities that they used to get in, and that's how they were discovered because the systems administrator realized, and this was probably 90s, probably in the 90s, probably late 90s when this event occurred would be my guess if it happened before I got there.
Mhm.
And at that time, I was like, that was an interesting cybersecurity incident for me, just getting started in cybersecurity. I'm like, that's really cool. Like someone broke into a supercomputer, and the only way they realized that had happened was they patched the vulnerabilities to prevent other attackers from getting in. I theorized earlier on my other show, Below the Surface, that they probably just did that for street cred. They're
Mhm.
probably like, who can break into the fastest computer? This person was like, I want to preserve my access because I just broke into a Cray supercomputer
hell yeah.
and I've got tons of street cred. I don't know. They could have been using it for other purposes. Who knows? But likely one of the things is just street cred. Now I said at that Cray in the 90s, I'm like, my phone probably has more compute power than that Cray did in the 90s. And then Bill, you added this article about a Cray versus a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, so this is great, and there's not a whole lot to read. So if you go to the show notes,
Yeah.
you get the pretty much the entire article here. But basically they go through the history. In 1977, a Cray 1 cost around 8 million, and so like adjusted for inflation, that's around 40 million in today's dollars, right?
Wow. And you imagine what kind of computer you can buy for $40 million today.
God.
It's a pretty badass supercomputer.
Yeah, and so then they start comparing the specs between that $40 million Cray 1 from 1977 to a Raspberry Pi 5 right now, right? So, okay, so the Raspberry Pi uses, obviously, it's much smaller, right? So
Sure.
they start out with size, like, yeah, okay, we get it. It uses a lot less power.
Was it Sneakers had a Cray in one of the scenes when they go to the office, right? It was the one with like the bench. It looked like a bench that you could sit at.
So-
Some people have converted it into furniture.
Yeah, so I've never seen a Cray 1, but in this article it said that the Raspberry 5 was 50 grams and the Cray 1 was 10 tons.
Holy crap.
Well, wait. The Raspberry Pi runs off, what is it? 1720 watts,
Yeah,
right?
12 watts.
The Cray, well, I'm thinking particularly the Cray 2, not just that it's 150 megawatts, it's three-phase 408.
Yeah, so it
480,
says
480 volt three-phase,
Yeah.
not just This is not going to run off a
This is so
your average
crazy. So
house.
the second stat lead they give is the power. So the Raspberry Pi
So
was
there's
oh
a Cray
yeah,
one.
that's right. I've seen that. Was 12 watts
Yes.
versus 115 kilowatts for the Cray, right? Okay, so this is the interesting part. So the Cray had about 160 megaflops of raw processing power, and the Pi 5 has up to 30 gigaflops, right?
Holy
So
crap,
that makes a Pi 5 200 times faster than a Cray 1, like a little
dude!
Pi 5.
It's crazy. My Pi 5 was brute forcing WPS pins on it at a pretty good clip, and that's tiny, like you said, tiny little low power computing device
So I'm
running Kali
curious,
Linux. It's totally fine,
what
dude.
is the definition of a supercomputer? What made a Cray a supercomputer?
That's a leak question.
It's well, the it's the way it's architected. I mean, really,
Mm.
we're talking about, vector computing. We're not talking about, how you write your normal code.
Highly
It's
specialized.
highly special. You have nodes that are entry points into the computer, and then you have compute nodes that all they do is crunch code
Hmm.
for as long as it's running. It's essentially a batch system, not an interactive system.
Hmm.
You
Mm.
have to write your applications to save state so that they can be stopped and started arbitrarily because the time is scheduled independent. So if you've got 17 minutes to run your app, at 17 minutes, it's being turned off whether the state is saved or not. And if you need a month of time to run it, so and also the other is the data sets are usually very large and they have scratch storage, which is incredibly high speed, and but you don't get to keep it. You got and if you want to store everything that matters, there's other storage you have to drain things off to store your data set.
Yeah,
It's
I think of it as specialized computing for a specialized workload to basically crunch a lot of data.
And so
So the one that was for sale, we talked about one last year, or the year before, and it was a supercomputer that was being liquidated. And I don't remember what the bidding started at. I don't remember. It was at one time it was like the fifth fastest supercomputer in the world.
Mhm.
Its purpose was to run weather models
Yeah.
to
Oh,
predict the
that would
weather.
have been the one in Japan that was
Cheyenne,
very
the Cheyenne supercomputer,
yeah.
right? That was the one, and it was weather modeling. So that's a very specific data set, specific application, but I need to crunch a whole bunch of data on a specialized platform.
and so like the process, so it would be almost like an ASIC type. I mean, I understand they're not
Yeah,
talking
yeah, no,
ASICs, but they're
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
you're good. You're
they're
good.
very, very specific type of calculations times
Mhm.
1,000 or whatever. So massively parallel for one
hmm
type of operation would be what would be considered a
Yeah.
supercomputer.
Your company runs on Google Workspace, but it's an afterthought for most security tools. Material Security is the first and only platform purpose-built to protect Google Workspace, securing email, data, and user accounts from advanced threats. From blocking sophisticated phishing attacks in Gmail to preventing unauthorized app usage and fixing risky file sharing in G Drive, Material continuously protects your data. Don't settle for second best. Protect Google Workspace with Material Security. Learn more at securityweekly.com/material security. Now, how is that different from NVIDIA's hardware that people are using for AI modeling? I kind of think of them
It
as
isn't really.
mini
mean,
super,
it's-
right? It's a highly specialized workload. You're crunching a very specific data set on specialized hardware. So people are getting their H100s or whatever, NVIDIA has a multiple lines of that stuff.
Mhm.
It's very similar. I think one of the differences
It's
is the NVIDIA line is using what NVIDIA's standard GPUs are, the Blackwell for AI processing, and they're ARM-based Linux computers.
you
Well,
have
I
to
mean, supercomputers run Linux, right? Beowulf clusters were a thing for a while.
Yep.
It's how you architect your code for the CPU. I mean, you're at that low
Yeah.
level. You're writing your application based on what it runs on. This is um, to get to optimize it. You're going to get
Right,
you're going to get
right.
every flop you can out of it, and so have to re-architect it for that. But in terms of what you're functionally doing, they're not so different.
Hmm.
And that's
Mm.
why they actually have built supercomputers based on GPUs. Uh,
Yes.
and successful ones, by the way. They get quite a bit of throughput. And in fact, I think that's one of the ways you can get a cloud-based supercomputer is just buying a computer with a shit ton of GPUs in it. That's a specific technical measurement there, by the way.
Well, so
Yes.
one interesting thing, my takeaway from this article was, like I kind of bitch and moan about how expensive Raspberry Pis have become. God, I remember these things were $1. Like I'd go to Microsoft
Yeah.
and they were $1, and now they're $160. Well, at least they're not 40 million.
Well, and in
Mhm.
fact, the Cray 2 was run. I mean, excuse me, the Cray YMP, which is not the next generation, but the generation after, was 2.1 gigaflops. We're still over 10
Wow.
times as fast.
That's crazy.
Wow.
And
Isn't that nuts?
supercomputers today cost hundreds of millions of dollars because it's not just the computer; it's what you got to do to run them. It's the support.
Yeah.
It's the
It's
cooling. It's the power.
cooling.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
the floor
Cooling and
space.
power. Well, we
And-
also talked about how Microsoft had the data center they deployed under in the ocean,
Yeah, well,
underwater.
that'd help. Just
Right, that's really cool. Actually,
leaks bad. Well,
leaks would be bad.
yeah, because yes, it's a liquid cooled device, but it's very specific liquids.
Well, it's mineral oil is where I was going earlier. I wanted to mention earlier, but some of the cooling. A lot of my conversations are with parents of my kids' sports. So there's a basketball dad that works for a company that sells data center equipment, and I was like, "You ever see the like mineral oil cooled system?" He's like, "Yeah, we were at a conference and we saw one." And he's like, "We had a customer that wanted one and was telling me about it." He's like, "Those are," he's like, "It's wild. There's like bubbles coming up, and the computer's in liquid. Obviously, it's non-conductive liquid. That's pretty wild."
So
can't you just drop a computer in mineral oil?
You could, because it's not conductive.
Yeah.
Well, but the interesting thing when the Crays were doing it, when the Cray 2s were out there, they used a perfluorinated polyether for cooling it, which when it broke down, it released a toxic gas.
Oh,
Interesting.
So I'm glad we're not
Cool.
using that anymore. I mean, that was one of the jokes, is that people were worried about the cooling chambers getting a leak and somebody getting in trouble.
Right.
Well, not
Could be
exactly a
bad
joke.
day.
But
Oh, Bill, I wanted to
Anyway,
talk
go,
about HDMI dummy plugs spoofing EDIDs. And EDID is in the HDMI protocol, the identifier that tells it what device it is.
yeah.
So, but my question is, so they make these dummy plugs that the plug can basically look like any device. So you plug it into your monitor or TV, and it goes, "Hey, I'm a whatever kind of device." Why would you want to do that?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of the plugs?
So the author of this article is a little bit cagey, right? So my guess,
I read this article when you saw it. I'm like, I read this. I just didn't add it to my story. So I'm glad you did.
Yeah. So what this is this article is that a guy was able to use an external programmer, a Raspberry Pi, to get into one of these HDMI dongles and change the ID of the device, being able to essentially, Paul, like what you said. So over HDMI, you get to specify what kind of device I am. I am a 1080p monitor. I am a 4K monitor. I am a TV, or I am a recording device. Those kind of things, right? So it's
so I had it backward. You would plug us into your computer or device,
right?
Output port.
That's right.
Not the input port.
That's right.
So into the output port.
Right. Yeah. And then that is what tells. So like as part of the HDMI spec, it does things to prevent piracy, right? So it will black out the screen. It will do all of these things if it has not authenticated the type of device that is connected over that connection. So my take on this, and just having read through it, is that this would probably be a way for us to purchase cheap HDMI dummy plugs on Amazon, modify them to state that they are a HDMI compliant device, and be able to record protected content. I don't know. I just having seen like
play it.
It's a piracy thing.
Yeah.
I was probably why I didn't add it. I'm like, I don't get the point here.
Yeah.
But you read into it, and I think very astutely pointed out that this could be a piracy anti-piracy piracy or anti-piracy kind of play.
Yeah. That's it. The end. If we need to,
That's
if
cool.
anybody needs to pirate, I mean, like, does anybody pirate anymore? No, come on, surely not.
Well, yeah, it's so I have one of my projects on my list is I have about 500 kung fu movie and like Chinese cinema, different region encoded DVDs with films, mostly martial arts, but some just foreign films on DVDs that are region coded.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Region coding, I think, is after the HDMI
Yeah,
piracy
I
checks.
feel like
Region coding is a different thing inside of the thing.
yeah, and I feel like
But that
most
that
of the
was where I would.
DVD rippers get through that, right? I feel
I
like
I think they've probably at this point broken
yeah.
the whatever on it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. This what I liked about this was, you know, more than likely this is probably something that somebody would like, right? Like this would be something that maybe I might need at some point. And quite honestly, I was kind of on a Raspberry Pi kick, and this was a cool Raspberry Pi project.
Oh yeah, no,
Well,
it
I
is
mean,
cool.
people should read this to understand the HDMI protocol and understand a little bit about hardware hacking. I thought it was a great tutorial on
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Hmm.
for sure. Sam, what do you got for stories this week? You got a lot. What's
Yeah,
what's
well, I already mentioned what I thought was the most important one in the New York Times. And the next one is probably number 3, Schneier on security,
Hmm.
because everybody implementing AI is discovering that it really isn't that great, and your employees aren't really getting that much value out of it. And what they're typically doing is doing something like summarizing a meeting and then
Mhm.
creating bullet points for people to work. So it's just assigning you more work. And
Right.
um, what they found is you can do much better. And what you do is, the other article, number 2, is saying what you do is you talk to your team and ask them what part of your job really sucks, that's boring and repetitive,
Sure.
and you write a tool to do that. So you
Hmm.
help them with AI. And Schneier figured out, like people pretend that a computer being smarter than us is a new thing. But of course,
Yeah.
calculators are smarter than us at
Yeah.
one task. And
Mhm.
Right.
so he says you have to find
Hmm.
things that AI are good at. You have to understand they're going to be not very reliable and not very accurate, but there's certain things they can do much better than a human. Like they
Yeah.
can obviously work a lot faster, they can take a larger amount of data, and so
Mhm.
on. So I thought it was a really useful article trying to guide people because most deployments of AI right now have been unsuccessful due to just throwing it in and assuming it's going to replace a human, like in your
Yeah.
help desk, and
Well,
that
they
is
think it's gonna
totally
do it.
not that's not what it's good at.
AI is gonna. I think the misconception is AI is gonna help me with everything. It's gonna help us better at everything, and it can do all the things. And what I hear
Yeah,
you saying, Schneier's going is no certain tasks, and you got to
right.
find those tasks, and then you may have to either find a model or train a model specific to a task. And actually,
Or
not me.
buy or buy a
You do have
tool.
to do that. Yeah.
Well, everyone's going to agents, and this is why the most common thing I hear about AI is everyone's going to lose their job to AI, and this is garbage because it's just another tool like a word processor. What's going to happen is people will use it to do a better job, and then they'll expect more work out of you. And so the people that aren't using AI will have to learn how to use AI, just like they previously
Right.
had to learn to use a computer a couple of generations ago when nobody really wanted to use a computer, but it turned out you couldn't possibly compete without using a computer. So,
This is
um,
this is
yeah,
my other thing I was thinking about was I use Feedly to aggregate all of the cybersecurity news and security research, and I use
yeah.
that for my day job to be able to guide threat research and guide research and engineering, and I use it for the show to find articles for us to talk about. And I was like, what if I could use AI? So I've got 1,000 feeds, individual RSS feeds that are aggregated in Feedly. And Feedly has AI, various shapes and forms depending on how much money you want to give them. They're very much a cybersecurity play. They're not we don't they're not a sponsor or anything, but I think they're a great company, and they're definitely trying to make a play in cybersecurity. But I'm like, how would I use AI, specifically LLMs, to do what I do on a daily, weekly basis? I'm like, wait, that's harder than it sounds because it can't replace me as a human, right? The
Well, but
thing I'm a
something,
human
yeah,
analyzing
yeah,
the feeds, going, what's interesting to me. I'm like, how do I
right.
train an AI model to figure out what's interesting to me? I don't know. I don't know that I could. I'd have to plug it into my brain and let it learn how my brain works to do that, right?
Well, you have to learn how to use it. I mean, supposedly there's a new technology which I haven't turned on yet. I supposedly can get it free for 18 months from Google that will look at my email inbox and pick out the important stuff.
Yeah.
more effectively. And I wonder if it can
But
do that because
how do
that
you
would
you
be
got to
very
train
helpful.
it? Yeah, but that's a generic training to what's important. I guess what I
Yeah.
should do is give it all my feeds, the fire hose of
Yeah.
information, but then train it on for the past 800 episodes. This is what Paul has deemed as important. Train it on that. Now go take the fire hose and show me stuff that's similar. Would be one
Now,
approach.
well, now, what do you mean by train? Because most of the time when people say they're training an AI, they don't really mean what I think they should mean. What
They
they mean is they
usually
just
mean
feed a lot of data
content.
in.
They
Yeah,
usually
they
mean
usually mean
context.
retrieval augmented generation, where you add exemplary content. That's not
Right.
training, but that's what you do. That's right. So you should add like a transcript of 100 previous shows and say, based on this, what do you think I
Based on
would
what we
like?
talked about, what would we? Yeah, you're right. That's probably not even training at that point either.
Well,
Yeah.
that's
But
what a lot of people are calling training these days. Maybe they should use that word. I don't know.
Yeah.
well,
No,
then there's
but
also
it's a
the
very good point. Go ahead.
then
Lee.
there's the
Yeah.
training in the meat bag on the prompt. That's
Correct.
equally important
That is truly
Yeah.
equally important.
because
Yeah,
Yeah,
so-
but anyway,
So,
But going back to the
that's the only point here.
Gmail
Yeah.
thing, Sam, and just so you know, Sam, I can hear you fine, but the audience is telling us that you are silent, but I can hear you just fine. But the Gmail stuff,
That's
they,
weird.
they've been trialing that
Work
for
on your lip reading.
years, right? So I've had priority
Yeah.
inbox and those types of things in my Gmail for a long time, and I got to tell you, Gmail does a great job of identifying the emails that before everything was labeled AI this and AI that. Like Gmail did a great job at exposing, like to me, these are the emails that you need to be you need to read right now, not for you.
Oh, it
But I
totally
think,
does
'cause-
not
but
work
I
for
think
me.
it-
It throws away
but
the
I-
good stuff. It hides.
Oh,
It
mine
shows me
are
the bad stuff. It's
fantastic.
not working for me.
Mine are
But I think that's
fantastic.
an opposite training model. I think that Google's probably training it on what's not important and just showing you whatever's left. So it doesn't really know what's important. It kind of knows what's not important.
So
It knows certain
knows what noise
indicators
is.
like there's an unsubscribe
Yeah.
link in that email, therefore it might not be important based on who it's sent to. Was it sent to you directly? Was it a list? Was it not? And it adds those factors in to make the determination that, oh, this is the stuff you probably don't care about. Here's what's left.
Yeah.
Oh,
Were
let's
you a
talk- I like
BC
the,
By the way,
sub?
I think all of my email is important, so I don't.
yeah, well, there's that too. The Armory crate thing was very interesting. Sam and I both had this story, and Cisco Talos researchers figured out that the driver. So Armory crate. Let me back up. I bought my two of my sons the Asus ROG Ally devices.
Yeah.
They're these little portable handheld
Yeah, they're
gaming devices.
sick.
They run Windows 11.
Yeah.
They're awesome. They were Christmas gifts for my boys. They eventually replaced their PCs.
Wow.
So I didn't have to maintain the full PC. I gave them both these Asus ROG Allies. It runs Windows 11. It has Asus Armory Crate software on there that updates all of the firmware. Its primary job to update the firmware for the Asus specific hardware that's in it. So my update process, when I learned about Armory Crate, my update process was, hey, I got to update Windows, but I also have to go into Armory Crate. It updates the firmware, including the UEFI BIOS, I believe also gets updated through Armory Crate. So it knows about all the different firmware components that run firmware. It will help you update those. Then I learned reading this article, Sam's article number 6, in one of my articles, is that and this makes sense, there's a kernel driver in Windows that allows Asus to interface directly with these chips that run this firmware in order to update them. So in order to do that, you got to be in the kernel and you got to have the highest level privileges. I know this because our product will take a dump of the SPY flash. In order to do that, we have to be a kernel module that has that level of privilege to be able to go in and flip registers and access buses to be able to have that level of privilege to do that, right? So the vulnerability was in the driver that Armory Crate uses to interface with these chips in the firmware. And that vulnerability was the way it validated the application that could interface with the driver was by a SHA-256 hash. And you could essentially become that program's signature by doing some hard link magic with a, what is it, time of
check, time of use. Yeah.
Time of check. That was the time of check, time of use, talk
Yeah.
to attack. So it would be its program in the beginning. Then it would say, "Well, change the hard link." So I'm acting as this Asus Armory crate executable, and then it would run the check, and then you switch the hard link back, and then your program is running in the content. It can interface with the driver. That's a very poor explanation. Go read the article. And you got to understand Windows hard linking and time of check, time of use vulnerabilities. But that's essentially how it worked. But that low level of access, holy crap, is like, I mean, it's essentially like unfettered access to all of the hardware at that point to do. You could read I read it as you could read SMRAM or system management RAM, access things in SMM mode. You could have such low level access that you could disable hardware based security controls within it. Like, the capabilities are staggering. Now, probably not all that dissimilar to a bunch of other drivers that are out there. I don't know, Sam, what your take on this was, but I was like, this is a known exploit technique. But
yeah, it sounds like it's just get system and Metasploit, another technique.
Yeah.
I mean, that'll try like 5 or 6 techniques, and usually one of them works.
Right.
So,
yeah, and this is giving you full kernel driver level access, which we've seen in a lot of other LOL drivers. There's a whole website that chronicles LOL drivers out there, right? But my other thing was, how many other drivers like this are susceptible to similar vulnerabilities as described in this article? Like, this wasn't anything new and novel, but I'm like, if you were to build a check and go check a whole bunch of drivers out there, that could be kind of interesting to figure out which other ones are vulnerable to this. And I think there's a huge attack surface here for these types of drivers.
Well, I've very often seen this kind of vulnerability in the proprietary software that comes with one brand of computer or cell phone. That's quite common for that stuff to have high privileges and be vulnerable.
Yep. 100%. It's frustrating because Microsoft knows all of the drivers they have signed, but they don't publish that list. If they had published a list, we could go download all of those drivers. We could create some check and verification for this type of vulnerability and identify all the signed drivers that have this vulnerability. But Microsoft is cagey about, well, what have you signed? Like, why isn't it public what drivers you have signed?
Well, they do run it through a certain security test, which is the command line verify command. And clearly, what will probably happen is Microsoft will just improve their test to certify a driver.
You're right. You're right, Sam. Microsoft should implement the check.
Right.
But then the problem is, once you've signed, we don't know how many drivers Microsoft has signed because they haven't released it. Thousands of drivers. Once you've signed all of those, if you go back and find vulnerabilities in a percentage of those drivers, then you got to revoke them. The problem is, if you revoke a driver, that has adverse effects on the system. And that's why Microsoft often doesn't revoke drivers, because what if it's a driver for your hard drive and you revoke the signature, and now the operating system can't see your hard drive? Your system's not going to boot.
Well, isn't there, something like Windows Defender ought to warn you if you're using a driver with a known vulnerability? I don't know if it does, but that wouldn't be too hard to implement.
Microsoft has I apologize for this term because it's antiquated, but they have I'll try and use the new language. They have the capability to implement an allow list and a block list for drivers, but not everyone implements that. There's like this weird
but for your hardware, you obviously would allow it, but it ought to pop up a box and warn you. Just like I see this box that warns you, like that password appeared in a dump list. It ought to say, hey, this hard drive has a driver that is known to be vulnerable. It seems like
and most of that is third party. Most of that's third party EDRs that are using the LOL drivers database and probably I don't know how much they do this, but I would imagine that the LOL drivers open source, like it's an open source project, right? You can go search for LOL drivers. They publish a list of drivers that are known to have vulnerabilities, or I believe it's also like suspicious behavior. It's not necessarily a vulnerability, but there are like certain drivers that by nature give the user, and by extension an attacker, access to certain capabilities. That driver could have some really good code, but the nature of that driver is that it allows someone to, what is it's like RW everything. There is a driver that lets you read and write the spy flash, for example,
Yeah. Of
right?
course, I think the real risk is not that you actually put in hardware that uses a vulnerable driver, but that somebody is bringing in their own vulnerable driver as part of an attack. And it
Correct.
seems to me like how often should a new driver be installed on your system? If you're not adding new hardware, that shouldn't be happening. So your endpoint protection ought to warn you, wait a minute, this software is installing a driver. Is that
I
really
Sam,
necessary?
you talk too much common sense on this show, you know?
Well,
Because
I don't know.
you're the
Maybe
one,
there's
you astutely pointed out, if you've got a firmware-based device and you've made the firmware for that device,
Yeah.
why should it run anything other than what you put into that firmware? And what you're saying
Yeah.
now is very much common sense. The same thing for drivers. If you haven't added any new hardware to your system
Yeah.
and you've got this new driver installed, that is a level of suspicion. I mean, it could be
Yeah.
legitimate, but there is a level of suspicion there for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh.
But oftentimes the OEMs, Asus, Gigabyte, and many others have this software, all well and good intentions, but the malicious usage of that software is often bad, right? We've covered it on the show a bunch, right? Like, hey, we
Right.
put this driver in here so that you can update your BIOS and you can go get the latest BIOS. Great. People should be running the latest UEFI firmware on their systems. That's great. But that process introduced an attack surface that now has vulnerabilities. So we get in this kind of cat and mouse game of, we want to introduce software to help protect our systems, but that software has vulnerabilities. Drivers are very much that. I don't know that we get to a point where we've solved the driver problem, quite honestly. It's software that has
Well,
potentially very high levels of access inside the kernel.
Well, Microsoft's number one priority for this whole system was to stop the blue screens of death you'd get in Windows XP, and I don't see that anymore. So I think they did succeed in that.
They
That's the
did.
main
Well,
purpose of the driver verification, is that it won't kill the
Right.
kernel.
To Microsoft's credit, they have continually over time, because I was tracking this at one point, they have added more stringent checks to certify a driver as signed.
Yeah.
Which is good. Now they're not catching every vulnerability, obviously, but they have made improvements over
I don't
time.
even think that was their goal. Their goal was just to stop it from crashing the whole machine.
Yeah, it wasn't security, it was stability. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Because Microsoft wants to avoid the CrowdStrike.
Right.
In similar
And maybe
instances,
they
right?
could upgrade it to actually doing a security test on the driver too. That would be nice, but
That would be
that's
nice.
probably going to take a while to implement.
That would be nice.
Speaking of security upgrades, you want to talk about the FAA?
Oh, is this the floppy disks?
Yeah, it's the floppy disks.
Some people
wanna
just
hear-
can't leave well enough alone. Everything is fine. Why do you have to keep
Well,
changing?
It ain't broke. We don't need to fix it until it is.
I know, but there's a lot of indicators that the FAA and specifically air traffic control, there's issues there.
Mhm.
There's issues with employment. Like, no one wants to be an air traffic controller. They are severely understaffed. They're using antiquated technology. And we've seen incidents and articles that kind of point to this. So, Lee, your article is kind of like the next iteration of this, that
Right.
we've got some old infrastructure and somewhat of a bad process that protects us when we fly, which is kind of frightening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the other, I mean, the interesting, I mean, they're asking for a $22 million billion with a B
22
augment to
billion.
$5 billion budget to do this. And
That makes it
they're talking about things,
$27 billion.
and they want to do an upgrade from their current network to IP-based networking. I believe they're going to go from point to point to something that's not point to point. It might be VPN,
my
whatever,
God.
but it's
So
now
the
exposing
infrastructure
things.
is even older and antiquated than I even
This is,
imagined.
back when you used to get point to point T1s, right? Or whatever circuits, and they want to switch to more general purpose circuits, which means more exposure to that system.
Oh God, can you not hack the air traffic controller systems? That would be
Please.
great. Thank you.
And in fact, apparently in other countries, these are actually systems that will be actually run by and owned by the airlines, not the government. But it's crazy. I mean, I can't believe they're doing Windows 95 and floppies, but this is a control system. I mean, it really is a big ass
Do they
control
really?
system.
So you said specifically the country's air traffic control system uses paper strips to track aircraft locations, floppy disks to transfer data between systems, and computers running Windows 95.
Yeah.
Wow.
And apparently also when there's an upgrade to their radar system, which they want to make more current too. But yeah, it's a little
Windows 95 had a memory leak that would make it crash every 2 hours or so with the blue screen of death, didn't it? I'm pretty sure it
Yeah.
did.
Well,
Oh,
it's
oh,
also if it's on an IP network, it's vulnerable to all kinds of things that you could make it blue
right.
screen just
You
by
couldn't
sending in a few
transfer the
packets.
network to the IP base. You
Pretty
actually
sure
have to build a
95 was a
parallel.
blue screen of death.
Yeah.
Ping of death.
Ping of death.
Yeah.
Ping
Yeah.
of death was a thing.
Yeah. So I'm thinking you're gonna have to build a system in parallel and then cut over.
For sure.
Well, hence the budget. If we had to think about how you do that,
It's crazy. Yeah,
it's a
gonna be
system that
expensive.
can't go down. Like hang on, just tell those planes to wait for a while we do an upgrade. And if it goes wrong, what do you do with the planes? Like I would not want to be involved with the IT for this because that is maybe I would because it's a huge challenge. But
And do the
Doge is
operators
gonna
log
solve
in
it by-
individually?
Yeah.
Or do
Doge
they?
is going to solve it by just rewriting all the code with Llama 2. So there's nothing to worry about.
Oh, well, then piece of cake.
I wonder who the contractor
the
is. that
problem
got
the
this
problem though,
bid.
I mean I get your comments in, but the problem is this code has to be resilient not just to cyber attacks, but denial of service. And that's it's a whole different realm. Like we typically dismiss denial of service attacks like whatever, like you can DOS this or DOS that. In a lot of industries like air traffic
But-
control, denial of service is like probably the most important thing to protect against.
So I mean,
in this
but
context.
moving, upgrading to, to realistic operating systems and modern network infrastructures does not necessarily mean that we're putting this thing on the internet, right? Like we can.
Well, no,
have-
no.
Let's hope not.
Right.
Let's
No,
let's
no,
hope we're evaluating connectivity to your point,
Right.
Bill. We don't just want
Yeah, but-
random systems hanging out on the internet. I don't care what OS it is. If it's on the internet, it's going to be attacked.
But
And some of those attacks are going to be successful.
Yeah.
Like,
but and I know that you can do things that when you even though with IP connectivity between providers is you can put devices on there that make it secure, particularly if you use instead of just like using the crypto built in your Cisco, if you go out and get a TAC line with real crypto in it, you can secure it damn well. Don't know if that's what their plan is. But it is one more potential attack
yeah,
vector.
but you're rightly it's not just connectivity, it's data security.
Yeah.
The integrity of the data is hugely important.
Can you imagine if
Where
they
the
said
where the
cloud?
planes are and where they're landing, that data and the integrity of that data is
integrity
like
is huge.
100% crucial, right?
Yeah, it's not a confidentiality; it's an integrity problem.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
I
because you
wouldn't-
can get the telemetry. You're right. You can get the telemetry. If you've got a hack RF1, you can get the telemetry of where planes are
Mhm.
Mhm.
because they have a GPS location. You can in the transponders. You can do that and figure out where planes are. It's not that. It's the integrity of that data that matters.
I mean,
Hugely.
just like you want to see the 14 planes in route of my house that
Mhm.
my flight radar picks up, and
Yeah, there's like an app for that, right?
yeah, I've got a little Raspberry Pi in the garage. It runs that
Yeah.
app.
It has
And
the
I've got a
ATSP
map
data
up right
yeah.
now.
Yep.
I wonder how I could probably show you. But anyway, but back to the FAA. I mean, I think it's really cool. They want to modernize their technology. Windows 95 is what 40 years ish.
Is it really?
So,
Oh
Good
my
idea.
God!
Yeah.
Don't
Think about
say
it.
that. That makes me feel really
But
old.
think about it. No, think about this. Think of an ICS that is run as well as this thing has for 40 years. That's an achievement,
Well, maybe 30. When did Windows 95 come out? It was the 90s.
right? I know.
35 years. Not quite 40.
Okay,
We're not
35.
quite 40.
So
We're not
30
quite
years.
40. 30 years.
Still,
30.
it's still an impressive accomplishment. I mean,
Yeah.
But I mean, we've talked. How many systems have we talked about that run in this context and run OS2 and run Windows,
VMS.
and run the old antiquated operating, and they just run.
Yeah.
So
And
the problem becomes so I have a company that I work with that has a very, very large manufacturing plant that has a situation not quite that dire, but
But you know,
but a similar situation. And the problem doesn't become like the exploits and the ping of death and all those kind of things. It truly starts becoming, how am I going to source a power supply if this thing goes out? How am I
Yes.
going,
How do you keep it
right?
running?
Like, how am I going to get an engineer to work on OS2? It's not OS2 warp. I'm making
Yes.
the, but where am I going to get an
Sure.
OS2
point's
warp
valid.
engineer?
On that
Y-
really
Right.
old, antiquated hardware that old people like us could
Right.
probably
I'm
remember.
But so
Like,
it doesn't
yeah,
matter.
sure,
It
we
doesn't
do,
matter
right.
if that thing sits and runs for another 40 years. The problem is when it breaks, how am I going to fix it? Right.
You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
old, to fix it's $10,000.
Well,
$1 to hit it with the hammer, but
right.
9,999 to know where to hit
Well,
it.
some of their
Um,
strategies that they do is they literally have a watcher on eBay, and if something comes up, they buy it for a spare, right? And
Yeah.
and like,
Oh.
and we're not really talking
That's
about,
not unique.
yeah. It's like that is just because it's going to
It's
cost,
it's
it's quite honestly, man, I'm a little surprised. $27 billion to revamp that equipment seems high to me, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
I
understand
don't know,
that.
man. But hold on. Think about how many airports there are just in the United States and how intricate and complex an upgrade
Is it
is to
though?
interconnected
Yeah,
systems.
is it?
it
That
I don't know.
the
Don't get me wrong. Yes, it is critical and it is complicated and it's interconnected. But once you
I
build
see
an
what you're saying though. 22 billion is.
yeah,
I live in Rhode Island. It's one of the most corrupt states in the nation.
Mhm.
There's some padding in there,
it-
right? And that this
yeah,
happens all the time in Rhode Island. And I believe it just like the social aspect, because it's such a small state and everyone knows each other. Everyone wants to feed each other's pockets, right? And that's how you get corruption. So when you see a high number, you're right, Bill. You see a high number like that,
I
you're
just
like,
it seems to me that
people are giving it to their buddies
yeah.
to make some money on
And,
Right.
this,
and,
right?
So that
and by
if
the way, I've seen articles that say that 90% of government IT upgrade projects fail, and they
Mhm.
always run over budget.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I know the second one is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I want to switch from planes to cars,
okay.
back to cars, because Kia,
Yeah.
again,
Again.
dude, the Kia boys is still. I was watching. I actually stumbled across. They've got some interesting ways to like. They feel like they hide it on social media. They create Instagram, and I've seen this in a number of different cases. They create Instagram accounts with innocuous names, and the descriptions on the video are AI generated and have nothing to do with the content.
Mm.
But the video I'm watching, I'm like, that's the Kia boys, like 100%. That is a Kia.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they actually showed the person like with the screwdriver in the steering column and like ripping stuff off, and it was like a series of clips. And I'm like, the social media networks are trying to get rid of that content on there because it's so easy to steal a Kia or Hyundai branded cars because of the attacks that we talked about. There's no immobilizer chip,
Right.
and you can take the steering column apart. You can put any USB-A adapter in and start
And
the
just
car.
to be clear, so this is what was so funny about the USB attack, and I was like, oh, that's so
Mhm.
cool. It needs a USB. It just happens to fit a USB.
It
That's
just happens
like
to
you
fit.
could
It's
use a
not right.
screwdriver
Yes,
or anything.
you could use
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. And so that's still a thing. And I'm just personally, I'm like, this sucks because one, people are getting their car stolen and banged up. Two, but even more important than that, people are getting hurt. Like young kids are not just hurting themselves, but potentially other people by taking these cars for joy rides. And it became like a trend.
And it
With
became
and then
funny. It became
police
a trend. It was funny. It was
it was
something that
funny, but like,
kids were
can you
doing.
imagine being a police officer and having to deal with all these cars getting driven
Right.
in these erratic ways all the
I know,
time? Like
and you
that's
start
gotta
getting a phone, like you
suck.
start getting 20 phone calls a day about, hey, my car was stolen. Well, was
Right.
it this brand? Well, sorry, that sucks for you. Like, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, dude. But also like people died. Like
Yeah.
there was, there'd be 4 teens in a car. In one instance, like 3 to the 4 teens died
Yeah.
in the car, and there was deaths attributed to it. It's awful. So then I saw this article, and this is research that has been presented I believe at DEF CON 2024,
Mm.
as well as Echo Party in Argentina as well. But I don't know that all the details were summarized the way that it was summarized today, and I didn't fully understand the problem. So this is different. This is Kia Ecuador,
Yeah.
which I believe are Kia vehicles being imported
Mm.
into Ecuador and sold in Ecuador.
So I don't think
But
that's
it
right.
could be other.
I think that they may be so, but they are. I think they're manufactured in the South American continent, right? Is I think
Oh,
right.
okay.
So they
Is that what
they may be imported into
they
Ecuador,
may be imported to other
but they were
countries?
not like you know.
They weren't in the
That's right.
US? Is
That's from
that
what I
okay?
understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
He
but
yeah.
these particular systems don't use rolling
Right.
codes. They
Right.
use the older, what I don't remember what he called it in the, but essentially there's not a rolling code on the key fob. So if you can use any
Replay.
kind of hacking device, right? If Flipper got the bad rep, but you can use a number of different hacking devices we've talked about on the show several times over to intercept the communications and then essentially just replay the code that would unlock and or start, I would
Yeah.
imagine also start
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
vehicle because the code is not rolling. It's a static
That's right.
code
Right.
on that key fob. And they actually shipped these key fobs. This person was in Latin America, in Ecuador, but other countries are affected as well. There are Kia models that are going back to like 1990s Honda,
Mhm.
basically, where there's no security protections
Right.
It's
on the code to unlock and start your
So what's
vehicle.
unfortunate?
he's saying that vehicles made in that region. Sorry,
Yeah,
Bill.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I'll go after you. Luke.
Okay. He's saying in the Ecuador, Latin America region, vehicles are made without rolling codes, and there's no security impetus to do the security analysis to even look at that. It's just like
That was the quote I put in there. He like this is like a summary of the article, like technical stuff aside, that he reported the vulnerability in May of 2024. No success in remediation or mitigation.
Well, yeah, you can't remediate it.
Yeah, like
it's
how do you, because you got to change parts
all of
out in
it,
the
right?
the
whole
car,
thing.
right? Like the
not just the fob, the car would be need to
The car.
everything would need
Right.
to. And what's what's
But-
bullshit what's
That's fine.
terrible about this is God, man,
Nice
I
save.
said I know, but I was like effing BS. I got fired
You're
up.
fired
yeah.
up, no, but
Yeah.
this is a fired up
Passion
story. We're
is
fired
good.
up about the
Passion is
story.
good.
I
What
get it,
sucks
man.
about it is it's not like this was an oops. This was not an oops. This was a choice that was made, right? Because when you start taking a look at where
Much like the immobilizer not
Exactly.
being in the
Paul,
vehicles.
that's
which
exactly
is-
my point. That's exactly what it's going to drive to. That is exactly made that choice. That's the
Mhm.
second time. That's the second time they've made that choice. That the immobilizer was a choice that they made. That is not again, like when we
Right.
start talking about
But they could do it in the thing that struck me about the Kia Boys hack with the immobilizer was they could get away with it in the US because we didn't have legislation that said if you sell a car in the US, you have to have an immobilizer.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of a whole ton of government regulations and an overarching government. Throw that out there. However, smart legislation has benefits. We could
Mhm.
point to several examples. I'll save that for a future show. But had the U.S. said you got to have an immobilizer if you're going to sell a car here in the U.S., we could have avoided people dying. There's not a lot of
Right.
there's a lot of legislation that's feel good, appealing to your base kind of stuff. Canada, by the way, says if you sell a car in Canada, you got to have an immobilizer.
Huh.
I'm like, well, that's super
Mhm.
interesting. And now you've got Latin American countries that are like, oh, immobilizers, whatever. We're just going to give you key fobs that don't have a rolling code. And the author talks about there's a huge amount of theft in these vehicles in Latin America. I'm like, yeah, because basic protections don't exist.
Well, you
you
start-
need
you start
immobilizers.
thinking
You need
about it-
rolling codes to prevent, like, it's basically petty
It
theft
truly is.
that you're preventing.
And,
It's
and you
like
start
truly
thinking
like
about it, and
you-
it can't be that. It cannot be that much of a cost savings in 2025 to implement.
right to put this technology
right.
right. Yes.
So back in the day
I
when it
agree.
was a new technology, and we had to
Sure.
develop code, and we had
The
like,
higher end vehicles got it
for
first,
sure.
and then yeah, sure.
Now
yeah.
that it's commodity. I imagine it would almost be the same cost. Like like honestly, it can't be that much different. And even with the immobilizer too, we're talking dollars here. Not hundreds of dollars, right?
But we're also talking about chips from. It's interesting.
Yeah.
chips and technology that are manufactured in China that you have to
Yeah,
import
maybe
in
maybe
the
that's
whole
all they
thing,
could
the whole
get.
thing too.
Maybe I don't
And
know.
I
I
don't
was
know.
doing
But,
some.
but this is all previous model. This is all before the tariffs and all the stuff that's happened in 2025.
Yeah, but we've
right?
had
This all
we've had
transpired
chip
before that.
issues ever since COVID, right? I mean, like you
Yeah,
like,
that was
No,
well,
that's
just
true. No, you're right. Yeah, okay.
supply chain
yeah,
problems there.
that's a better way
Yeah.
of saying it. Yeah.
But and I was doing some searches on car immobilizer, and it's like the phrase that stuck with me is it's standard vehicle anti-theft technology that's in almost every vehicle for the last 20 years. I mean, that means it's table stakes, right?
We're older. We've watched older movies. In a lot of older movies, there's the hot wiring.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think as hackers, we always kind of romanticize that, like, oh, you can hotwire a car, like that's like hacking a car. In older cars, you could totally
Yeah.
hotwire. However,
Good luck.
at some point, the industry got technology and was like, oh, we can actually prevent hot
Isn't
wiring
that funny?
with technology. And there was a huge, I mean, it's kind of like PCI, to
Yeah.
be quite
Mhm.
honest with you, right? It was a huge step forward in
And
preventing
nobody even talks about
theft
that.
and
That's
fraud.
hilarious, Paul.
And you're
Yeah.
right, Bill. No one taught. I
Yeah.
didn't realize
Right.
that until I was like, what is the Kia Boys? Why am I reading articles about this Kia Boys thing? And I'm like, oh, we have the technology. And if we don't use it, bad things happen. And it's the same thing with the key fobs. Like, we have the technology to prevent the super easy with dollars worth of equipment.
Right.
You could intercept and replay this stuff. It's just RF, basic RF stuff.
Yeah.
If we don't raise the bar beyond basic RF interception and replay, bad things happen. Like, go figure. Like, basic controls and regulation actually improve the problem. Like, you could basically wipe out these problems, right? Of people stealing cars with immobilizers and rolling codes.
So basically, Paul, you're a communist.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
look, I don't, like I just, I'm common sense. It's common sense, right? Like, the frustrating thing for me is when political agendas and regulations just go against common sense. And to me, the
Well-
common sense thing would be there's regulations here in the US or any country that go, you got to have you got to have basic security on vehicles that are sold. Just like I believe it should be basic security on computers and devices that are sold. But let's go to cars. Like, you got to have an immobilizer and you got to have rolling codes on your key fob. Otherwise, like, there's like major consequences that, like, the insurance companies get involved. In fact, one of my neighbors sells insurance, and she was like, I was wondering why, like, some of my clients are buying Kias and Hyundais, and the insurance was exorbitant to the point where they didn't buy them. I'm like, you know why? I'm like, have you heard of the Kia Boy? She's like, no. And I told her the whole story, and she's like, I had no idea. I'm like, I guarantee you that's why your company is not going to insure those vehicles for a reasonable cost, because there's a huge probability and likelihood that they're going to get stolen.
Well, Paul, if you're going to be the representative of common sense, I want to hear about your story number 18.
Hey, we should close on that one.
Dude, it's just, we have this technology for LLM. This is a huge, we've been through this like multiple times in history where we have a technology. Yes, it can do XYZ, but like, should we really use it? Like, should you give your LLM command line access to Nmap? I mean, maybe, but like, we have this new we have this new shiny thing. We've got blockchain, we've got the cloud, we've got DevOps. Should we use it for everything in every situation? Maybe not. Not.
Well, I want to defend this. I mean, the current process is, if you want to use a hacking tool, you Google, you look up like a blog that tells you how to use it, then you type in the command. This just cuts through all the middlemen. Now you just have an LLM controlling your Nmap. I want to make an LLM that controls Metasploit and see how good it is.
Yeah.
So this sounds like fun toy.
You know what's awesome is next week, I chatted with HD Moore today. He's coming on the show next week. and HD Moore, obviously transitioned from Rapid7 and Metasploit. I actually asked him, I'm like, dude, do you spend time on Metasploit today? He's like, no, not really. Like, I've moved on to other things, and the team is doing great. Like, HD is the nicest person you ever want to meet in your entire life. So he would never say anything bad about anyone. But he was like, the team's doing great, which I agree. I don't think he was, just kind of polishing it for me. He was like, no, the team's doing great. He's like, but I'm doing the run zero thing and describe the technology. And I was like, and he said something like, there are like some devices that will fall over if it notices too much ARP traffic on the network. Now, take this in the context of your LLM running Nmap. If there's not a human involved in running the tool and testing it and making sure nothing is going to fall over, imagine the consequences of this stuff running automatically based on a prompt, based on some model that's trained to run this tool that doesn't have the context or
What's the difference
understand
of the
everything
first
a
time that you
human.
ran Nmap, though? I mean, like, I know that
It's
like,
true,
no,
dude. And we were talking about printers. I'm like, because printers really haven't evolved in the past 25 years in terms of, like I threw Nmap at a printer and it just started printing out. Larry has the famous story where he's like, a scam was running and the printer was just printing garbage, and they just kept feeding
one
like they fed
character per
boxes
line,
of,
right? Like,
boxes of paper because they thought it was someone's print job. And that's my fear when AI takes over these tools, is there's no human intervention to do that, much like when we first ran these tools. Now, hopefully we've learned in the past 25 years that these tools do have these consequences. Hopefully we can train AI and LLMs to run them better, but I'm skeptical.
I don't want to imagine the consequences. I want to see the consequences. I want to run this thing and see what it does.
Let it loose on the internet.
Dude, I empathize with that 100% because I'm like, if you're going to put a device on a network today, there's like a bar of resiliency that you should meet that many devices just don't meet today. HD was telling me, and he'll come on the show and talk about it next week, right? He was talking about all the devices. He's like, we try not to crash shit. And it turns out that's still in 2025 super freaking hard, man.
That's so
right?
crazy.
Like I feel like it should be easier. 25 years ago when I was running scans on the university network, it was a different story. And I get it. That was 25 years ago. But now we've got devices on the network that fall over if you breathe wrong. I'm like, we haven't gotten better. How have we not progressed?
Well,
right?
Probably,
How have these devices not progressed?
I think I've told this story before, but I was not allowed to scan the 911 network, right? When I worked, because they weren't sure if it was going to fall over or not, for the exact same reason that, like when we were talking about the air traffic controllers, right? These equipment, it's probably that stuff. It's probably not. I mean, I don't know. I'd like to hear HD answer that. That's going to be a great interview, but my guess is that it's not the new stuff being put on our networks. It's the old stuff that still is.
Stuff's just not resilient.
Yeah. Or
today,
the pieces of crack like light bulbs or whatever that, that have an, but an endpoint and an HTTP endpoint that does something if you hit it, right? Like, and well, if I'm going to scan them, I might hit it, right?
HD's got a lot of stories about that. All their technology that he's like, if you send it something it's not expecting, it freaks out.
Yeah.
And like, we as hackers, that's what we do. We send stuff that it's not expecting to see how it behaves. And it's like some devices' behavior is just to
what show is
fall over
HD on? When is that?
Next week, next Wednesday.
Sick. Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Looking forward to it. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you guys for joining tonight. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. Thanks to the live stream audience. That will conclude this episode of Paul Security Weekly. Thank you everyone. Over and out.
Over and out.